Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, June 28th, 2023. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Michael German, former FBI agent who infiltrated white supremacist groups. He'll be with us to discuss why those groups target non-white people in their ranks. And later in the program, Matt Ford of the New Republic will catch us up on this deluge of Supreme Court decisions as their term ends. Meanwhile, SCOTUS imposes limits on laws that criminalize threats on the internet. First Amendment maximalist decision, you could say. In Mallory v. Norfolk Southern, SCOTUS also upholds a Pennsylvania law requiring corporations to be sued in the state if they do business there. Trump says the audio of him saying that he had not declassified the documents that he took was just bravado. You know me. It's just bravado. It's another way of saying he was lying, but I don't think this time he was.
Snowden should have used that.
Right. Yeah.
It was all just bravado. I don't know anything about that, actually.
Now he's countersuing E. Jean Carroll for defamation, classy as always. Rudy Giuliani interviewed in the special counsel's election interference investigation. Ooh. Kevin McCarthy in hot water with the MAGA cult after questioning whether Trump was the strongest candidate against Biden. Whoopsie.
I mean, he is.
Yeah. Totally. U.S. Intel says a senior Russian general knew of Prigozhin's mutiny plans and that he may have thought he has internal military support. Israel approves thousands of new illegal settlements in the West Bank. More wildfires in Canada. Air quality in the Midwest and Chicago at dangerous levels. Thousands of nurses in Texas and Kansas walked out and striked yesterday. Massive study analyzing decades of health data in Denmark shows trans people have a 7.7 times higher suicide attempt rate. In better news, Maine's legislature advances a bill protecting gender-affirming care for trans kids. Yusef Salaam, a member of the exonerated Central Park Five, set to win a city council seat in Harlem. And lastly, U.S. pedestrian deaths are at their highest in 41 years, according to a new analysis. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, everybody. It's the Majority Report. It is also Hump Day. How are you? How is everybody doing? Sam is out for the rest of the week. His road trip with the kids should have just started. So I will be with you for the rest of this week.
As of now, we're calling it interim.
Yes, as of now. I mean, let's
watch his space.
Yeah, I mean, please don't make alert Sam to anything. Is all I'm trying to say. All right, we're doing this very, very subtly. It's a soft coup, potentially. Let's get right into it because I mentioned in headlines that the Supreme Court is in the middle of essentially dumping all of its decisions at the end of June before their term ends. So we're going to be seeing a lot of important decisions coming down that we haven't even seen yet. We have the affirmative action case coming up. We have the student debt cancellation case coming up, which I'm pessimistic about, even though the standing for the plaintiffs in that case is a complete joke. We have the version of the gay wedding cake case, this time with a graphic designer that's also going to be ruled on. But the first big domino to fall did fall yesterday, and that was Moore v. Harper. This was a win in aggregate for people who are in favor of democracy. There are some pessimistic takes, some optimistic takes, but the worst case scenario was avoided because the Supreme Court essentially rejected the independent state legislature theory, which was an extremist right-wing conception of how elections should be managed at the state level, essentially saying that state legislatures should be able to gerrymander, write election laws, ban mail-in ballots, do whatever the hell they wanted, but without any recourse, like without the input of other legislative bodies or other like state courts and the governor. It was essentially saying, no, this is just the state legislatures that can make these determinations. So it was an anti-checks and balances argument, right? And what the court essentially ruled was that, no, we're going to have federal courts have jurisdiction over this and they can be a check on this. And some people are saying that's a good thing. Others are saying, well, hold on, look what happened in Bush v. Gore. This is the Supreme Court giving itself more power. But the long and the short of it is, yes, this extremist right-wing effort has been done away with for now. So the worst-case scenario has been avoided. But Laura Ingraham is not too happy about this decision. Here she is on her show, recently demoted, by the way. I think she's probably aged out for the Murdoch crew, because now it's going to be Jesse Waters at 8 p.m. Hannity hangs on to 9 p.m. and Gutfeld has supplanted her as one of the other three primetime hosts. So she's having this conservative activist, Carrie Severino, on, and they're pretty bummed out about this ruling.
Right now, the Supreme Court is dominated by 6 very conservative justices. They've begun to make very, very radical, extreme, and activist rulings.
The Supreme Court has lost the confidence of a great portion of the American public.
An institution that has been scandal-free for most of its life and has now been corrupted by the dark money influences.
What? All right. There's some who are saying that this constant drumbeat of criticism and of protests at people's houses, that's gotten to the newest Republican appointees on the court. Well, the conservative court has leveled a series of rulings that to some look like an attempt to maybe insulate them from external criticism, or is that too, pedestrian of an analysis? Well, just today, the Supreme Court ruled against the North Carolina GOP state legislature in an election law dispute. Here now is Carrie Severino, president of the Judicial Crisis Network. Carrie, look, it's disappointing for those of us who, rarely disagree with Alito, Thomas, and Gorsuch on an issue such as this, that Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh would vote with the Democrat appointees. What's your take here?
I think as no surprise here, Justice Thomas clearly had the best argument of the day. He recognized the case that they were deciding was actually completely moot. They shouldn't have even had a decision, and yet they kind of went out of their way to
decide this case.
To decide the case. I think that was the wrong route, and it's frustrating. It's particularly frustrating when you see the Chief Justice and Kavanaugh, not just in this case, but in others, doing things that look really political. That said, I think at the end of the day, even today's case was a lot better than it's being played. I think a lot of people on the left want to do a victory dance.
It's a defeat for Trump.
But
they have to tie it to Trump.
Right. They said there was this fringe independent state legislature theory. Actually, it turns out the fringe theory is the idea that the state Supreme Courts can do whatever they want. Actually, the court all agreed that there have to be some limits. Again, I don't think they should have even agreed on that. They shouldn't have heard this case in the first place because North Carolina had already resolved it.
That's hilarious. This was a ruling on the broad usage of the independent state legislature theory. So now, essentially, this undercuts any other state's attempts to do so. The reason people are tying it to Trump is because Trump tried to overturn the results of the 2020 election. And the reason the Supreme Court was hearing this case is because this was an attempt to codify those efforts into law, which would make it much easier on the state level for Democratic election results to be overturned. Because we know this. I mean, luckily there's been a bit of a backlash where, you know, the Pennsylvania state legislature has tried to attack the election laws in their own way, and that hasn't worked out for them. But for the most part, there were a bunch of extremists on the state level, on the Republican side, who, if this independent state legislature theory actually came to pass, they might have been successful in a variety of states of just throwing out a bunch of ballots and saying, hey, it was Trump. We declare these ballots invalid, and we've decided that we're going to just call it for Trump. That's why it's being tied to him. At the very least, what this would have done is allow these state legislatures to impose incredibly draconian restrictions on the ability of elections to be held. Mail-in ballots could have been nullified. Early voting could have been nullified. They could have done whatever they wanted in terms of polling locations.
Yeah, they weren't going to do more to help people vote.
Yes.
Like, that's the thing. Like, we can all this. It's frankly academic. This independent state legislature theory. They want the right to not take votes, to not count votes, to throw votes out, or to overturn votes.
Yeah, right.
And that's simply the right that they're fighting for. And to go back to Ingram's premise, I agree with it, that they do act in ways that are basically political and to insulate themselves from public censure, and that's why we shouldn't have a Supreme Court. But this whole, like, the actual fundamental issue here is because these state legislatures want to overturn the results of elections.
Right, and the reason too that they say it's not as bad as it's being portrayed by people on the right, and that the left's win is maybe a little bit premature, is for the reason I cited earlier, that the Supreme Court really did give itself more power. It codified, or at least set a precedent for the future for their ability to weigh in on these kinds of electoral disputes, in addition to obviously what they ruled in Bush v. Gore.
And again, like, to me, that should be the Congress's job. I do not trust the Supreme Court to be in charge of getting rid of gerrymandering and civil rights.
Yes, exactly.
For the next 50 years.
Yeah. And so that's why that's the silver lining for the anti-democracy right. But we'll be talking more about that with Matt Ford in a bit. Right now, we have a word from one of our sponsors. Sam, take it away.
Also, this episode brought to you by Zippix Nicotine Toothpicks. Zippix makes it much easier for you to stop filling your lungs with smoke or with vape. You can get your nicotine fix anytime, anywhere, without having to rely on those nasty cigarettes, or those, God knows what's in those vape things. Zippix Toothpicks gives you an easier and a healthier and more discreet way to get your fix. They're available in 6 flavors. They have options in 2 milligram and 3 milligram of nicotine. They're perfect for flights, for sporting events, restaurants, literally anywhere, everywhere else that smoking and vape are banned. And it's a great way to start to get rid of your cigarettes, get rid of your vape, and replace them with something that's also going to provide you a relief for your oral fixation. I know, that's the way I stopped smoking. And now these are the ones that I use. Zippix also offers caffeine and B12 infused toothpicks. They got a couple of different flavors. This one's the cinnamon and spearmint. And this is a great bridge off of your nicotine habit. Zippix has already helped tens of thousands of customers leading a healthier lifestyle. If you currently smoke or vape, they can probably help you too. Make your lungs happy. Make anybody around you who has a nose happy. Make your, God knows what other organs are under pressure because you're vaping. Try Zippix nicotine toothpicks today. Ditch the cigarettes, ditch the vape, get some nicotine-infused toothpicks at zippixtoothpicks.com and get 10% off your first order by using the code majority at checkout. Your lungs are going to be glad you did. Just a disclaimer, the product contains nicotine, which is an addictive chemical, and you must be 21 or older to order. Zip more, smoke less with Zippix nicotine toothpicks.
We are back, and we are joined now by Mike German, who is a fellow with the Brennan Center for Justice's Liberty and National Security Program, author of Disrupt, Discredit, and Divide, How the New FBI Damages Democracy. And Mike, you're working on a new book about white supremacist violence, and that's going to be published next year, it seems. Mike, thanks so much for coming on today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So you're a former FBI agent. You infiltrated white supremacist groups in the 1990s. And I'm just curious about your experience with that. Obviously, scary work. But how would you say your work, from your perspective, fits into the Bureau's broader history of racism, like in terms of targeting civil rights activists, and frankly, that's ongoing, honestly, with Black Lives Matter as well. What is your perspective on how your work fits into that larger picture analysis?
So it actually, I think, was reflective of what was going on and still going on. People assume that because the case was successful, that it was supported right from the very beginning. But that actually wasn't true. It was really in both of my undercover cases targeting the white supremacists and far-right groups, there was a lot of resistance in management and at headquarters to those cases, and it was only because there were really very effective case agents who did the work to gather the evidence and had the administrative skills to get over every obstacle that those cases were actually approved. And frankly, it was made more dangerous because there were a lot of administrative obstacles that were being thrown in front of us that we had to overcome as I'm working directly with these dangerous individuals. So we were successful, and if you look through the history of the FBI, you'll find cases where similarly effective agents were able to go out and make cases. Even today, there are some good cases you could point to, the investigations against a white supremacist group called the Base, where the FBI can be effective. They have the tools, but it's just not prioritized. So if somebody wants to investigate environmentalists, they don't need to have a lot of evidence suggesting that there's some crime going on. They're given a green light and, in fact, given a national scope in their investigation, where, even in our investigations, even after they became successful and we worked our way into the people who were trafficking in illegal arms, we were constantly being told, stick to your region, the jurisdiction of the field office,
and is your
failing to recognize
go on,
that these are national groups. That these groups operate on a national and even international basis. So working them like a local police department would isn't the most effective methodology.
Yeah, and I am curious too, like you must have seen what some of your colleagues were able to do when they were, doing work that wasn't combating white supremacy. Like, were you surprised, or was the contrast in the resources and the support that you were given incredibly stark when you looked at the work that other people in your field were doing?
Definitely. And, the first case that I worked in 1992 targeting neo-Nazi skinhead groups in Los Angeles, it was my first undercover operation. So I didn't really know what to expect, and therefore wasn't terribly surprised by bureaucratic obstacles. As everybody in the FBI used to say, bureaucracy is our middle name. and all cases have those problems, but it was really only in talking to other undercover agents, particularly agents working drugs, where there was just flush with money and authorities, and nobody blinked at traveling around the world. I recognized it was contrast, but I figured as a program, the domestic terrorism program was learning how to do an operation like that. So it was expected that they would be a little cautious in how they went about it, and miserly with using resources to avoid criticism. But then when I continued working undercover cases and continued to see the same kind of bureaucratic resistance, I recognized that this was a deeper problem.
And is that really what motivated you to leave the FBI and speak about this more publicly?
So it really came down to a case, a post 9/11 case, where, again, when 9/11 happened, we all recognized the horror of it, but I was hopeful that the silver lining would be that there would be recognition that the counterterrorism program is mismanaged and needs to be revamped and headed in a completely different direction. But instead, what the FBI management decided to do is pretend it was a matter of limits on their intelligence collection, so taking those limits off. But if the problem is mismanagement of information and misunderstanding of information, having more information doesn't solve that problem. It makes it worse. And I became involved in a case that actually involved international terrorists and reaching out to white supremacist terrorists here in the United States, seeking to get some support from them. And the case, like my other two cases, was seriously mismanaged in the initiation. And at the time, the director, Robert Mueller, after some criticism of the FBI's handling of the 9/11 intelligence, said, well, if there's any agents out there that see a counterterrorism case being mismanaged, call headquarters. So I did. They didn't really want you to call headquarters.
Right.
And I was told I would never work undercover again, and then kind of put on the shelf, and realized after 2 years of trying to turn it around that my ability to work on effective cases at the FBI had ended, and it was time for me to find another way to talk about these issues.
I mean, that's well, we're grateful, because then we get to talk to you and pick your brain about some of the things that we don't see behind the scenes, but we only read about, obviously. And your personal account is super consistent with what we've heard and seen in terms of resource allocation within the FBI. I guess now let's talk a bit more about your undercover work and your work with white supremacists. You were interviewed in for Brennan, and I read that interview about your experience seeing white supremacist groups recruit non-white people, particularly the focus was Latino white supremacists, because right now, Enrique Tarrio of the Proud Boys was a Cuban American. Nick Fuentes is an open Nazi. Even the neo-Nazi shooter in Texas was of Hispanic descent, and I think that a lot of people feel that that's an incompatible perspective, but
inconsistency.
But in fact, it's clearly a concerted effort by the groups in order to launder their agenda. Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure, and I think it's really important to recognize, as they do, that race is a social construct, and who is considered white can vary over time. And particularly with Hispanics, a lot of the white supremacist ideology suggests that it's an ancestry in Western Europe that makes you white. And so many Hispanics have ancestral connections back to Spain. So if somebody had a Spanish surname, they could just say, "Oh, I'm not Latin American.
Right.
my ancestry traces back to Spain, which is in Europe, which makes me white. And there really wasn't a lot of investigation. If somebody claimed that, okay, you're in. And obviously, as white supremacy and far-right militancy merge, there are far-right governments all over the world, and there are ethno-nationalist groups all over the world that have different races and are focusing on a different ethnicity that are like-minded with white supremacists, so tend to work in concert with them. But and also human nature is just odd. Sometimes people identify with a group that outwardly hates them, and because race is a social construct, sometimes it's just trying to associate with power. So if white people are the group in power in a particular country, and I'm not white, I might want to assist them just for the short-term protection that gives me, hoping that things will change before the race war starts that they're trying to start. So there have always been people with Jewish backgrounds, people with multiracial backgrounds who've been part of these movements.
Yeah, and I think people think of the Chappelle skit of Clayton Bigsby, right, of the black white supremacist, but it really is obviously more complex than that. Would you say it's this desire to be close to a sense of power that draws from their end people into it? Based on your undercover work, what did you see was really the hook for non-white people to be associated with something like this?
Well, really the hook for all of them, for the groups that I was infiltrating, the part of the white supremacist movement that was openly participating in criminality and violence, a lot of them were just criminals.
Right.
And, there aren't too many, if you try to join some local social club and tell them about your love of bomb making, you're probably not going to be very popular. But if you find this group, you'll be very popular, and they'll let help you expand your interest in bomb making. So there were a lot of people who really weren't that interested in reading Mein Kampf, but were interested in committing violence, and that's what attracted them to the movement. So, like any other group, you wouldn't expect some 19 or 20-year-old Marine to understand the geopolitics of whatever invasion or police action that they're involved in. They're more mission-oriented, and if when one of my cases, tracing who were engaging in illegal weapons trafficking, they took me to Asian arms dealers, and they wouldn't say, "Oh, well, that violates my ideological goals to actively engage with other racial groups." That's not how it works. They have guns. We want guns. We're going to get them.
Right. And how does this recruitment effort fit into broader, the branding of these groups? Because what's the group that advertised itself as a drinking club? Is it the Proud Boys?
Oh, right, the Proud Boys.
It's the Proud Boys. Yeah.
Right, and a lot of groups, particularly the far right militias, try to have a more palatable public positioning. So they'll claim not to be white supremacists, and the Proud Boys were very much practiced in that and called themselves instead Western chauvinists, which is kind of just a semantic trick, right? They're talking about the supremacy of Western Europe, which is white. Obviously they could point to individual members who might not fit the public perception of who is white, but their activity was hand in glove with other white supremacist groups when they were committing crimes. So it was a distinction without a difference. And there have always been groups like that. And particularly as the far right movement has received more public attention and is trying to expand its reach. One of the popular T-shirts is "Pinochet did nothing wrong," embracing South American fascism and ethno-nationalism that helps them find partners in their efforts to move their agenda forward.
I mean, and it fits very nicely, unfortunately, with the global fascism effort that we're seeing, whether it be Bolsonaro in Brazil, whether it be Erdogan in Turkey, whether it be what's the guy of Hungary? Orban in Hungary. There is a message discipline, but with those governments, and you'll hear the same. You heard the same stuff that Trump was saying coming out of Bolsonaro's mouth, essentially, and like Tucker Carlson's going to Hungary to do these interviews, and the internationalism is also a part of, I would imagine, the strategy of this.
Exactly, and always has been, right? If you go back to the original Nazis, and it always frustrates me when you hear FBI management talk about white supremacy as domestic violent extremism because it's a domestic ideology. We didn't invent Nazis.
Yeah,
right? It's always been an international ideology and international in action as well. And the original Nazi Germany was allied with the Axis power, which included Japan, and had positive relationships with some Arab countries. So it's a misinterpretation of both history and their ideology that would make somebody believe that this is a problem that is domestic in nature. It only occurs in the United States. And it's fascinating when I mentioned the base cases. One of the individuals arrested was a Canadian military deserter who had come across the border to participate in the plot, and an FBI official identified him as an example of international domestic terrorism, which kind of shows how a very confused lexicon.
Yeah, it should be contradictory, but it's just like, I mean, lastly here, you talked about in your interview how this effort to brand themselves and have non-white people in their ranks, this is a part of their, I think, public-facing brand, but also a way for them to skirt under some classifications made by federal law enforcement when it comes to domestic terrorism and white supremacist violence. Can you flesh that out a little bit for our listeners?
Sure. And just quickly, as the Latino population of the United States grows, the distribution of power will change, and who will be considered white will expand. And of course, there are already many ethnicity or Hispanic is an ethnicity, not a race, and there are white Hispanics and black Hispanics and Asian Hispanics. But who the movement considers white will expand as well to incorporate them, because they need numbers and they need supporters. So they will recruit in communities that are achieving more equity in the society. Because I think the law enforcement agencies still misunderstand how the ideology works in practice with the white supremacists, the violent white supremacists and far-right militants. It's easy for them to mistake what is happening and overlook somebody because they don't fit their idea of what these groups do rather than the reality of what they do.
Mike German, fellow with the Brennan Center for Justice's Liberty and National Security Program. You can pick up his book, Disrupt, Discredit, and Divide: How the New FBI Damages Democracy, and be on the lookout for his next book coming next year. Thanks so much, Mike, for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be joined by Matt Ford. Sorry about that, guys. Just a bit of connectivity issues today, but now we are joined by Matt Ford of the New Republic, here to talk about a very busy week in the Supreme Court world. Matt, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.
So let's start with Moore v. Harper, the independent state legislature case. I have read different analyses of this decision, ranging from pessimistic to optimistic. It seems that the pessimism is centered around the fact that the decision essentially empowers federal courts as opposed to doing something more broadly to protect election integrity. What's your take on how this decision was framed?
Well, it really depends on whether you're a pessimist or an optimist. If you're an optimist, you read the decision and you see that the court rejected quite decisively the independent state legislature doctrine, which is something that is a fringe theory on when state courts can review election laws for federal elections passed by state legislatures. If you're an optimist, you see that they've rejected that theory and removed a potential threat to the stability of the 2024 elections. If you're a pessimist, though, you see the little trailer that Chief Justice Roberts snuck in at the end there, where he suggested that, even as we're saying that state courts can decide these cases, we're also carving out a role for ourselves. Now, if you're a pessimist, you might be more inclined to think that that could lead to certain other forms of mischief down the road.
Right, and we've kind of seen some mischief, though, from the Supreme Court on elections, like now to turn towards pessimism. Bush v. Gore, an example of the Supreme Court overruling state courts for the worse. What's your take on that, fear of something like that happening, giving them essentially the last word when it comes to cases involving elections?
Well, I think it's somewhat inevitable. The Supreme Court was never really going to sit on the sidelines if there's another Bush v. Gore type dispute that the lower courts struggle to resolve. I think that the problem is not just is not whether they have this power necessarily, but how they use it. The problem that really stood out with what Chief Justice Roberts wrote was that he didn't seem to articulate any sort of standard, any sort of test, anything for lower courts to use to sort of guide how to do this. That hazy understanding is going to be ripe for future applications that may not be predictable. And of course, if you can't predict what the law is doing, it gives the impression that it's arbitrary.
Yeah, but then now I'm moving towards optimism again. Like the idea that the Supreme Court would satisfy leftist concerns over election integrity with a standard that we could all get behind, that seems like that was a bit of an unrealistic expectation. I mean, I think we've avoided the worst case scenario, which is allowing these state legislatures, which can contain crazy right-wing nut jobs, as we know, to have as much power over how elections are structured. I mean, this could, if they had endorsed this theory, as three of the justices seem to think would have been on the table for them, that would have opened up so many horrible outcomes potentially for election integrity in this country.
Absolutely right. And I think it's worth noting that this is a case that was involving partisan gerrymandering.
Yeah.
Now, that's something that Roberts has previously said the federal courts can't get involved in. He said that in a case in 2019. So now, if he had gone the other way on this, if the conservative justices had gone the other way on this, you would have a scenario where states could redraw these partisan maps that are highly favorable towards one party or the other, and in practice, it's usually the Republicans. And now federal courts couldn't review them, state courts couldn't review them, state constitutions wouldn't be able to affect them. In terms of dodged bullets, this was a huge one for the future of American democracy.
Well, happy to have some good news, because I'm not sure we will in the upcoming cases. But before we get to that, I also wanted to highlight, you've been writing about the Supreme Court and its approach towards tribal sovereignty. And oddly, Neil Gorsuch has a much more positive and productive interpretation of Native American case law and tribal sovereignty in this country versus, say, what Clarence Thomas has has delineated about what his approach is going to be in cases moving forward. But I guess let's just touch on that Navajo Nation case, the fallout from it, and where the fault lines or battle lines are being drawn, I should say, with respect to the conservative justices on tribal sovereignty.
Well, sure. I think that the Navajo Nation case really clarified a sort of enduring question that was circling the court over the last years, and that was, why is Gorsuch so passionate about these tribal law cases? He often sides with tribal sovereignty, but it's more than just that, right? He writes about it with great empathy. He writes about it very persistently, and it's something that clearly animates him. And I think what we've seen with the Navajo Nation case is that he's not just espousing this on his own. He's responding to something that he's seeing within the court, and that is sort of a move by some of the justices to disregard tribal sovereignty. And I think we see that in Justice Thomas's concurring opinion, where he sort of lays out how he thinks much of the Supreme Court's precedents on Native Americans should be overturned. That would have far-reaching implications for the tribes, and I think that Gorsuch's passionate defense of tribal sovereignty makes a little more sense in that context.
Yeah, and then in contrast with Thomas, Gorsuch being an outlier in this instance in a 6-3 conservative Supreme Court doesn't really help a ton of matters, because there's going to be a swing vote as well. But Clarence Thomas, as always, in the depths of being like the worst person of all time, clearly has a very different approach than what we've seen from Gorsuch.
Well, and I think that it really shows something about what originalism. We talk about originalism a lot. We talk about the court. We talk about how they read the Constitution. We're really seeing two different approaches to it here, and I think they're quite telling about themselves. Because when you read, Justice Gorsuch go through the history of Native American treatment in this country, the history of how tribes were moved and relocated, you see somebody who actually does appear to understand the original public meaning of what these provisions meant, how they fit into history. You contrast that with Justice Thomas, which very much starts from sort of a very narrow, constrained reading of the Constitution, and then just flows from there. It's a really striking difference in methodology that could have ramifications, obviously, for tribal sovereignty, but also speaks volumes about how they approach other cases.
Yeah, and what are some of the other cases that you feel? I know that they decided that they weren't going to overturn the Indian Child Welfare Act, but there could be more coming down the pipeline here. What's your sense of how this fight will play out in the coming years?
Well, the big question is what the other justices will do. We know what Gorsuch will do. We know what Thomas will do. Where do the rest of the court's conservative justices fall? And we've seen some signs that, there may be some wiggle room. Certainly with the Indian Child Welfare Act case, we saw Justice Barrett and Justice Kavanaugh join with Gorsuch on that one. And then, a week later, we saw them go the other direction in Navajo Nation. Whether or not those justices side with Gorsuch or Thomas in the long run will really decide the future of tribal sovereignty in this country for at least the next few decades.
Well, that's a scary proposition. Let's now talk about some of those upcoming cases, though, where the outcomes may not be as positive as they were in Moore v. Harper. We have the affirmative action case coming up, student debt, same-sex marriage in regards to that graphic designer person. But let's start with affirmative action here. These are two plaintiffs, right? Or two challenges to one, a private university, Harvard, and then UNC Chapel Hill, which is obviously a public one. But what the justices seem to be deciding between is overturning the precedent, which is Grutter in this case, if I'm not mistaken. It seems like they, based on oral arguments, are leaning towards doing so and essentially saying, hey, affirmative action's based on race for higher education. It's outlived its usefulness. We've solved racism in schools, and there you go. Is that your sense of how things are going to play out as well?
Well, the challenge with covering the Supreme Court is that it's always difficult to predict how opinions will actually come out. We've seen that in the last couple of weeks, certainly in the Voting Rights Act case last week. So I would never guarantee that something will happen. But I will say that it would be a tremendous surprise if the court does not overturn Grutter, or at least does not sort of severely limit affirmative action in college admissions. This is a slate of justices who has strongly expressed views against that in the past. We have Justice Thomas, who has argued that it was unconstitutional all along, all the way since 1868. And we have, Justice Roberts, who has argued that, he's got that famous line, the only way to stop discriminating on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race. These are justices who very strongly believe that the Constitution is colorblind in all aspects and that you cannot use race as any factor in policy decisions. And I think that what we should expect, barring some sort of very surprising behind-the-scenes development, is that that's how the opinion will play out. It's really just a question of how far they will go in terms of, limiting it to just college admissions, or whether they'll speak more broadly about other aspects of diversity programming in society.
Yeah, is there no differentiator between public and private schools in this instance? Do you sense that there will be a way in which they try to parse anything on those lines?
I mean, it's always possible. The challenge is that, if for those who would make that argument that, Harvard, while a private institution, does receive federal funds. And so part of a condition of receiving federal funds is abiding by, the constitutional restrictions on race discrimination.
Right.
So that would be harder for them it would be very hard to thread that needle if that's the route they wanted to go.
There you go. Thank you for clarifying that. I remember that was part of why these cases were able to kind of be brought together now. On student debt here, people are also pessimistic based on oral arguments. As you say, though, it's very hard to predict. They seem to be skeptical about the authority that Biden had in this instance, which I think is silly. But the part that should be the easiest to undercut is the lack of standing by the plaintiffs in these student debt cases. Like, what is the harm that's being alleged here? But it seems, based on them taking it up, that they feel that that standing is sufficient for them to make a decision in this instance.
Well, they could change their mind on that, though. We saw that in the Indian Child Welfare Act case, which we just discussed. Right. Where they took up the case and then decided that some of the plaintiffs, in fact, did not have standing. And, whether you want to read that as them looking at it more closely and thinking, we were wrong, or whether you want to read that as them thinking, you know what, we don't want to get into this right now. We'll just say no standing and move on. I think the challenge with the student debt one is that you have a very clear contrast between justices who are very strongly against it on policy grounds per se. You had Robertson and Gorsuch saying that, what about the people who didn't pay student loans, which is sort of more of a political argument than a legal one. But, for the justices, standing is tricky. If you change the standings, the precedents for standing, you basically create more work for yourself, which is sort of a blunt way to put it. But, the justices are reluctant to tinker too much with arguing who can bring cases before the court. And, there are also questions about whether or not the Missouri state institution is supposedly being harmed by this is actually have legal standing to bring the case of its own, whether Missouri can speak on its behalf. This one's a lot harder to predict. I wouldn't be willing to guarantee that it goes any way or the other. And I think it comes down to really what the justices think about the procedural aspect and whether or not they think there might be another way to deal with this in the future.
And this graphic designer who is trying to challenge based on, I believe, what it was, religious objections that she didn't want to hypothetically make a website for a gay couple that could be getting married. This is, to me, it seems redundant with the cake case from a few years ago. But what is this case? How is it different? If you don't mind explaining that.
Well, with the cake case, we had a Colorado baker who declined a same-sex couple's request to bake a cake. There was a very clear fact pattern as to what went wrong. There was an injury. There was standing. This case is, like you said, a lot more hypothetical. You have a Christian web designer who thinks that Colorado will punish her if she refuses to design websites for same-sex couples. She does not currently design those websites. She has never designed those websites. And she only has her promise that she might do it in the future. That is pretty hypothetical, and that is pretty fraught ground to essentially ask for what could be a major change in First Amendment law before the court. But, you know, this is a case involving religious freedom, and we know statistically that scholars have studied this, that the Roberts Court is more likely to rule in favor of plaintiffs who bring religious liberty claims than any court in the last 100 years. So whenever that happens, we have to wonder, is this a case where, you know, the Supreme Court will actually look at it and say, well, procedurally, this might not be up to snuff. Maybe we shouldn't go this far on this front. Or maybe they'll look at it and say, you know what, this is an issue of grave importance to Americans' religious consciousness, and we should go full steam ahead.
Yeah. I mean, clearly, there seems to be some understanding from the right-wing groups that are backing these efforts that they feel they'll have a more sympathetic ear, all the way back to Dobbs, which I think yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And we now do have a preview of some of the things that after this term ends in a few days, what the Supreme Court is going to be starting to take up next year. You wrote about this in the New Republic. The fact that they have decided that they're going to take up a case that could prevent Congress from passing a wealth tax. What is this case? Who are the plaintiffs? How is this? I mean, how is this even possible? They're preempting a potential wealth tax?
Well, that's if you believe the plaintiffs, that's what they think the court can do in this case. You know, this is a case that in the meat and potatoes is actually about the Trump tax cuts that were passed a few years ago. There was a provision in there that was being challenged. It involved a one-time repatriation tax. It's mind-numbing for anyone who's not a tax lawyer. But that's the basic gist of it, is whether or not Congress can levy that tax under the Constitution, under the 16th Amendment, or whether they have to do it under a different mechanism that's more complicated. Now, that dispute in of itself is interesting, but not really significant. What sets this one apart is that the plaintiffs and their lawyers explicitly push this case as a way to say, hey, the reasoning that you could use to strike this down could also be used against federal wealth taxes in the future. And we know that when Democrats, especially Elizabeth Warren, especially Ron Wyden, have pushed for these in recent years, there's been a lot of pushback from the conservative legal movement saying that they aren't constitutional. And so this is a way to sort of preempt that and get it before the justices before Democrats even have a chance to pass it. That's not my supposition. That's what the plaintiffs and their lawyers have actually said.
I mean, they are scared. It's funny to see in a way, but it's like, I mean, could not be more clearly within the jurisdiction as laid out by the Constitution of what Congress is supposed to be engaged in. The power of the purse, right? Like, this is exactly what Congress's role is in terms of the congressional or the constitutional delineation of their duties, is it not?
Well, the plaintiffs argue, to their fairness, that the 16th Amendment only allows income taxes to be levied without apportioning it among the states. You have to basically adjust it by population for each state. But if you do the income tax, you can just levy an income tax on everyone. Now, the proponents of the wealth tax say, look, this is basically an income tax because, you know, with wealth, you can borrow against it, you can take out lines of credit based on it, you can derive income from it even if it's not direct. They say, no, hold on. We want this to be read narrowly. We want income tax to be read narrowly so that you can't do this because otherwise it would violate the Constitution. And so how the justices come down on that could be decisive in whether or not Congress can do this without jumping through a lot of very difficult hoops in the future.
I mean, honestly, like, there needs to be some sort of leftist or liberal mechanism that can do this kind of thing. Like say, God forbid, there's a Republican Congress and a president agrees that, hey, let's start to privatize Social Security and Medicare. I would love for a leftist group to bring a case based on similar grounds just because, like, hey, I don't agree with this, and the Supreme Court should strike it down, because that's essentially what they're doing. They're circumventing democratic process that hasn't even happened yet and trying to put a chilling effect on it via unelected priests, the Supreme Court.
I mean, I think that the Supreme Court, this case won't be heard until the fall. It won't be decided until probably next summer. The Supreme Court has gone through a lot in the last couple of years. It's gone through a severe decline, a very measurable decline in its public esteem. And I think that may weigh on the justices. Now, whether that will weigh enough on them to say, hey, this isn't as big of a case as it needs to be, that'll be down the road. But I think the more that people perceive the Supreme Court to be acting in ways that are inimical to democracy, that are partisan, that are political, the more likely it is that there will be a backlash. And I think the justices, if they want to retain the prestige and power that the institution enjoys, they have to be conscious of that, because if not, Congress will take action.
It really is incredible how, like, this Elizabeth Warren has a special place in, like, triggering certain legal conservative minds, whether it's the CFPB. They've been trying to attack that for years at this point, and they're successful in ways of bleeding it dry. Whether it be the wealth tax, just the threat of what she's been proposing, it's amazing to me. Yeah, there's a reason. I mean, you hear about how she's so despised on Wall Street for that kind of stuff.
If memory serves, and this is going a bit off of memory, I think there is even another CFPB case coming up next term. So, in a way, to make a bad pun, it really is the return of the Warren Court.
Well said. Well said. I mean, we can only go down from there, Matt. So I'll let you go because that was a perfect way to end it. Matt Ford of the New Republic. You can read his coverage, all his work about a variety of things, about covering the Supreme Court as well. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me. It was a joy. Appreciate it. All right, guys. With that, we're going to wrap up the first hour of this program, head into the fun half. The number is 646-257-3920. Guys, we need your support more than ever. Join themajorityreport.com. Please support this program. There's some weirdness with YouTube ads.
There was a concerning piece in the Wall Street Journal last night that said something like 80% of ads that YouTube serves off-site, I believe. I don't subscribe to the Wall Street Journal, so I got paywall, but don't meet their standards, and the people might be entitled to a refund. So I'll just say we take a good chunk of money from YouTube to keep the lights on here. So become a member at jointhemajorityreporters.com.
Please do. We don't have Rumble backing or anything like that.
Yeah, we might have to start being nice about Saks and Calacanis and all those freaks pretty soon.
Oh, I gotta tone all of that down in order to get some money. So, guys, please become a member if you can. We're gonna take calls in the fun half again. The number is 646-257-3920. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning, we had a good talk last night with journalist Yasha Levine about Russia. We also talked about what did we talk about in the post game? The Reddit moderator strike and how the Reddit CEO basically wants to IPO, and he's like, "How do I do this the best?" I'll do what Elon Musk is doing and just fire people and destroy the community for, in his case, an prospective IPO in the future. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning to hear that.
And on ESPN, Bradley and I did way too early over-unders for the 32 NFL teams, which got us pretty hyped, pretty fun. We also spoke about the NHL banning pride jerseys because they're cowards and pathetic. And we spoke about all the recent NBA trades. YouTube.com/ESPN show for that. All right, guys, heading into the fun half. We will see you there, and we'll do one Tim Pool clip from the interview. That's the tease. Become a member so you can have access to the fun half whenever you want. All right. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it. All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half. Oh, no. Are you ready? Who sent us this?
Turkey. Alpha males are back, back, boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back, boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman!
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Dinner.
Yeah, or a couple of them, just put them in rotation.
DJ Dinner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy!
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. It is the fun half, everybody. To read some IMs. Noble Villain, Emma, I heard that the NBA and the Washington Wizards snuck a news story about their team getting partially purchased by a Qatari fund that was also a part of the FIFA disaster last year. I hadn't heard about it until today. Figured it was worth sharing and getting more context. I saw that. I think I saw it after we did ESPN, but this is going to be happening more and more. And it wasn't just the Wizards, right? It was another team that I can't think of off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, Washington sports in a really, really tough spot right now. Although thankfully Snyder's finally selling. But
I listened to Austin Reeves' podcast on the Ringer. He's a point guard, played for the Timberwolves last year, and they were talking about the Phil Mickelson, the live thing. And his buddy, like a personal friend, is also his co-host, and asked him, like, do you see NBA players doing this? And he said, absolutely, and very soon.
They are going to come for different sports soon.
There's a new collective bargaining agreement in the NBA that is going to be very. I mean, and it's sort of like, to me, with my ideology, it's like we need to either S or get off the pot with who gets to own these things. We already had the situation where Phoenix Suns, a franchise, that has the value because of all, like, Charles Barkley, Dan Marley in the 90s, Steve Nash, Amar Stoudemire, Shawn Marion in the 2000s, recently Devin Booker, Chris Paul, like those guys, those players built that into a multi-billion-dollar organization that the racist who owned it was able to sell.
Yeah, and make a massive
earnings.
profit. I mean, Michael Jordan just sold the Charlotte Hornets, but he bought it for hundreds of
pittance.
millions and then just sold it for billions. And whatever. Jordan's like the least problematic owner possible.
Well,
but
he should be able to. Like every player should have a ownership stake in these. And I don't know how you structure this. I'm not like a labor expert or a co-op expert or whatever like this. But I do know that the situation where the dumb son of the racist son's owner shouldn't be benefiting with generational wealth based on stuff that was created by athletes.
I mean, the owners are completely not necessary, but they are vanity projects for billionaires. Like we could have, in theory, what the Green Bay Packers have, where it's collective ownership, not by the players, but it's a structure where it's
municipal.
It's municipal, and there is like a CEO of the team essentially, as opposed to having one guy who just happens to have enough capital to purchase a team. And like we're seeing it right now with the Oakland A's. These billionaires will hold communities hostage if they don't get their way, and then if they don't get the tax giveaway that they want, they'll go to a different location.
Yeah, and like billionaires are so important to this process because the entire structure of America has decided that rich guys are going to be vital to do anything. And there's only a very brief period of time captured in the New Deal by an interesting book called Lords of Creation, where the state actually said, hey, actually capitalists can't do this. They can't set up an economy for war, for instance. They can't even electrify rural areas. Capitalism can only ultimately extract, or in certain cases, like expand something into a consumer product.
Yes.
But this idea that it can actually build out, like, and meet the needs of a society is proven over and over again, both theoretically, Karl Marx, and in history by the American project, as just not feasible.
And it's such a threat, like, because these billionaires write these laws. The Packers are one of the oldest organizations in football. It's literally in NFL's bylaws that they can never have a structure like that ever again.
Yep.
That you need a billionaire to come in, because for them, you know, they don't want the players to be empowered in the way that they are, even though it's clearly obvious that everything about a team comes from the value of its players. And this is how labor, honestly, sports in this model is a really helpful way to view labor politics more broadly, because it's just so direct in this situation.
Yeah, and I also like hate how instead of like ownership, they're empowered as like capitalists. So what are they given now that the players are excited about is the ability to invest their own money that they already earned from wages from capitalists that owns the teams into, say, the WNBA, which they weren't allowed to even do before.
Right.
And which is just like, okay, you know, we'll let you do a little bit more, but it is empowered not as you as like the laborer who built this entire thing and upon whose like shoulders this rests, but as one of us in a sort of way. And the other thing is with like the college athletes thing, where we're not going to give you any sort of like wage or ownership over what you're building for these universities, which goes to like the head coaches' major salaries. But you can sell yourself to another capitalist by marketing their product in commercials.
Exactly. That's why NIL is I will take any opportunity for the players to actually make money, 100%. But it is totally insufficient. They need to be getting wages. The amount of value that these athletes are providing for their university is insane, and they should be compensated commensurate to what they're providing. Like, if you can work at the college bookstore and make a wage, you can be a laborer as an athlete on the team and get paid sufficiently. So, Florida Barber NBA teams in Milwaukee and Philadelphia were flipped by venture capitalists for huge profits. Yes, true. And the Milwaukee guy, he sold like 2 years ago, right? The Milwaukee owner, I forget. But yada 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 says, hot take: sports teams are public utilities, same as a city park or a community center. It provides entertainment for the people of the city. It enhances their experiences. These should be publicly owned, 100%.
Yeah, I do think like some mix of municipal or public ownership and player ownership is probably I don't know how to do it because we're basically banned from even experimenting with that stuff.
Right.
A rich guy, probably a hedge fund guy.
Well,
or,
look at how soccer structures itself in Europe. I mean, it's completely foreign to Europeans that the soccer team would just, because a capitalist decides, I want to make a buck in another city, that it would just be completely supplanted.
Right. I mean, the new Suns owner is a mortgage guy.
Yeah.
Like, these are thieves.
Noble villain Emma. Well, I literally just read that one. Courier 11 Seconds says, looking forward to Peter Thiel's Both Sides arc when you all suddenly become very wealthy with no advertising. Bo from South Dakota, out of curiosity, are you against white people adopting Native children? My wife and I adopted a Native child this year out of foster care. We had him since he was released from the NICU and has high medical needs. His mother only saw him once, and that was the day of the adoption. No, I'm not. But I am in...
You need to understand the history of it.
I'm not going to make a broad, and good for you and your wife. I mean, that's an amazing thing that you've done. But of course I'm not against that. I just was not in favor of tribal sovereignty being overturned where Native families should get preference.
There's a long and frankly genocidal history in this country of moving kids from their native parents into white households and teaching them to be Christian.
Right.
That is, and so I bet if you're a person that listens to this show, you'll probably be more open to, say, letting them access their culture and not I would hope forcing your religion onto them. That is when it becomes extremely problematic. But yeah, be good parents.
Yes. Vermont Ben, I think it is possible that Putin permitted the mutiny, or at least had advanced knowledge of it, as a pretext to purge the Ministry of Defense of inept leadership and people who claimed they could take Kyiv in 3 days. I mean, I don't think so. And I think, oddly, the U.S. intelligence on this front has been, from the get-go, pretty on point. Never take U.S. intel with at complete face value. But the fact that they're indicating that people within the military ranks might have been aware of this, there's a strategic reason they're saying that. They want to weaken Putin. They want to make it look like the mutiny was broader than the mercenary group. But I'm not dismissing it out of hand because of the U.S. track record being kind of good in this war.
I mean,
so far.
I think it's very. I'm not gonna say anything definite, but I think you're already looking into it too much based on like what we know. There's no way, in my opinion, that Putin wanted one of his military leaders to call another one of the military leaders pussy and say that the invasion was just to get him a medal.
Right.
Like, I don't think that. Like, I think like I don't think that that Putin wanted that, and then I don't think Putin also wanted to say, "Hey, you're a traitor," and then and you're done for, and then I'll say, "Okay, fine, just hang out in Belarus." Like, I just don't think that's where.
Yeah.
But again, like, this is very speculative. I don't.
We can't know. Tobe Accurate says, Goat, Emma, does Sam know you are positive about Elizabeth Warren? He called her a backstabber because she didn't bow at the Bernie altar. Did Sam say that?
What was said?
I mean, you must be a new viewer because there was like a 2-year period where I was called an Elizabeth Warren shill for like the entirety of my career, the start of my career. It said, "Oh my God, Emma, does Sam know you're positive about Elizabeth Warren? He called her a backstabber because she didn't bow to Bernie after."
Sam called Elizabeth Warren that?
I don't think so.
I probably said that. But I don't think Sam. I think Sam's been much more measured.
I agree she was a backstabber in that situation.
Yeah.
And yeah, the primary was not a good look for her.
No.
Calling from an 832 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 832.
Hey, my name's Jason, and I'm from Fort Worth.
Jason from Fort Worth. What's on your mind?
Yeah, so I wanted to call and talk about Emma's appearance on Tim Pool's show and the conversation specifically surrounding gender-affirming care for children, because I think it's a top case study of the cynical use of academic research by conservatives. So our favorite kind of content, where we can dunk on idiots like Tim Pool for YouTube drama purposes, and we get to learn something.
It's a twofer. Jason, you are on it.
Yeah, so in the debate, Tim Pool pulled up a study that claims that about 80% of gender dysphoric children desist or stop showing gender dysphoria after puberty. Now, this study was also used by the state of Florida's health department and the Arkansas Attorney General in her debate with Jon Stewart to justify their banning of trans-affirming care for minors under 18. And so the important question we should all ask when we're confronted by weird statistics like this is, how robust is the study? Now, you may get some blank stares at first, but robustness is a pretty simple concept. I'll use the example of presidential polling. So just because Trump was beating Biden in Texas ahead of the election doesn't tell you that Trump's beating Biden in Florida, or in California, rather. Those polls that are conducted in Texas are only robust to Texas due to sampling only in Texas. And in your debate with Tim Pool, you said that you can find studies that say anything, which is partially true. But I think the more correct thing to say is that you can find studies that aren't robust, that can't be applied to other contexts.
This was one area that I wish if I were to go back, looking at my preparation, I think I prepared a lot what I wanted to say. I should have done a deeper dive into the conspiracy theories that are used to negate the arguments I was going to make, including this assistance myth, which is widely cited, as you say, by right-wing actors on this area.
Yeah, and like I said, all the states that have banned trans-affirming care, if you go up to the Florida's Department of Health website, they still have this 80% statistic. You cornered Tim at one point, and he pointed to the screen 98%. Are you going to refute that? Anyway, so back to the study itself. The study that he cited, which is actually a literature review, which is not a study on its own, there's no problem with that, but that's not an actual study. No original research was done. These were conducted whenever, the children who were in this study were either not gender dysphoric medically or were classified under gender dysphoria by the old DSM-3 and DSM-4 classifications.
Decades
old
data. So
the literature reviews, so the latest study is from 2012, but the studies actually go back to 1968. And obviously the social attitudes back then are not robust to the attitudes today. And the DSM-5 classification wasn't released until 2013 and had stricter guidelines for gender dysphoria, including things like socially transitioning as a requirement. So the kids, even from this 2012 study, probably wouldn't have been included in this new definition that we use today, and is why the August 2022 study that you cited is better, which says that 92% of kids who socially transition don't desist, and that should be driving policy.
Yeah, I think it was 94, and then I misspoke and said that it's 94% continue. They do not. They persist in their gender identities. Then it was 3.5% that after that 5-year period, they identify as non-binary. The 2.5% is the cisgender piece. The kids that went back and then identified as their birth gender, and those were heavily weighted for children under the age of 10, when any kinds of treatment would be completely reversible and fine.
Yeah, no, for sure. And now I'll get on to my last piece of this, which I think is the funniest, because obviously if you came up to Tim in the debate, if you had said this to Tim, he would just lie and say that his study was robust. But the funny part is that he pulled up a Wikipedia page on detransition, which, by the way, A+ research skills, to find the statistic that he cornered you with. But everything that I just said and more was mentioned literally in the next sentence after the statistic. So I guess my question is, are these people cynical, lazy, or some combination of the two?
Both.
Yeah, I mean, they're liars. Absolutely.
And he was, I don't even know, who's a true believer, because if he really thought I was a pedophile, I don't know why he wants to hang out after, right? I mean, I think it is cynical. I think it is.
Yeah, he's a liar.
Driving they understand where the money is. Calling people pedophiles and groomers is where it's at. Targeting innocent teachers and.
She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
A pedophile was.
Why
and
would
she
you
rejected
offer?
that. So I called her a pedophile because
Yep.
my feelings were hurt.
Yep. Totally normal behavior. Poker with the boys, poker with the pedos.
No, if you're
is
willing to
what we
go
call
from,
it.
if you're willing to go from this
She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
to I am seriously thinking that she is a pedophile. That is an insincere person who's a liar. Like,
Yeah.
that, it's as simple as that. Like how dumb he is. Yeah, he's a dumb guy, but he's also a conscious liar.
Yes. And I think
Yeah.
that's part of what I was trying to exploit and what drove him to kind of have that meltdown and then make that insane accusation. It's
Yeah,
a rejection
I'm
that
sorry.
I'm not going to go along with the lying, and I'm not going to play nice afterwards either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just like more about him lying. Like something I noticed, I was actually trying to like read the studies that were in question, and most of them were locked behind a paywall. So there's like a 0% chance that he's read any of these actual studies that the
totally.
literature review was based on. So
Right.
I'll
Well,
just say that.
Jason, thanks for the call. It's informative and appreciate the context.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Speaking of Tim, let's just do this really quick. We'll, just pointing out some of the moments from the debate. So this part I thought was an interesting moment in my debate with Tim Pool when I try to pin him down on his claims about the 10-year-old girl in Ohio who went to Indiana to get an abortion out of state. And Tim had claimed on his program that that was a, quote, hoax. Now, it's clearly not. The abortion happened. The doctor in Indianapolis who provided the abortion spoke about it, then was censured or fined, I should say, by the state because of her speaking out about it. The rapist has been charged. There's nothing about this story that remotely resembles a hoax. But Tim had said it. And so I wanted to ask him about it, why he says these kinds of things. And this was that exchange. Also said that
I don't think that's a true thing, actually.
the 10-year-old who got an abortion, who was raped, you call that a hoax. Have you retracted that statement?
So there's very deep context to that. What we're talking about when
But
I
that's
say
been
hoax,
proven. I mean,
Right, right, but
charged.
so-
The
so-
rapist has been charged,
Right,
and
right.
the doctor who provided the abortion fined.
So this is a
in
really good
Indianapolis.
example of the problem in the culture where I would say, see, you don't know what I actually said, because I didn't say what you're describing.
You did. I just watched it last night.
Right. And so what I said was the fact that they politicized this to win a political point is the hoax, not that the child was abused.
How does that constitute a hoax, Tim?
So like, let's say there's what's a good example of this? Ahmaud Arbery. Ahmaud Arbery is a really great example, right? So here's
No, I'm talking about this example though.
Right,
The
right.
one that
So-
I just brought up.
So right.
Pause it. So one cope I'm seeing from Tim Pool fans, whether they're like 16-year-olds who don't really know the world yet or 52-year-olds who know it too well,
Yeah.
is that Emma failed to engage with certain of Tim's hypotheticals. And this is
I deliberately did not engage
exactly
with them.
because that stuff
Because it's
is
bullshit.
masturbatory.
Yes.
You are being led into an irrelevant area to distract from the actual topic at hand. Like this is
That's his go-to
Exactly.
rhetorical trick, is going to talk about when asked a direct question that might put him in an uncomfortable position. He engages in hypotheticals or examples that are tangential to the point at hand.
Right. You don't want to talk about how, say, every medical body in America is like, yeah, actually trans care is good. You'd rather say, what about hypothetically this thing about female genital mutilation? Because, and there's a certain part of his audience that has been conditioned to be like, oh yeah, this is actually smart reasoning as opposed to what it is, like a red herring.
Exactly. And he does this throughout, and that's why I was trying to get him to stay on track here. But here we go.
Ahmaud Arbery. Ahmaud Arbery is a really great example, right? So here's
No, I'm talking about this example though.
Right,
the
right.
one that
So-
I just brought up.
So right, if I can't explain to you that manipulating a story for political gain is the hoax, then I don't know.
What's
what
the
else to say.
manipulation?
Oh man, this is an old story. I have to pull it up. I think the issue was that they
Pause
were
it.
able to actually.
The manipulation is to call it a hoax,
Mm-hmm.
and the political gain there is the anti-choice. That's the only manipulation there. Everything else was just simply reporting.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Get the treatment in state, but because of the law, they decided to seek it elsewhere. And I said, that is a hoax. I didn't say that it was a hoax that the girl was abused. I said, if they could have sought treatment in state under the exemption, I think it was Ohio, right? There was an exemption saying in the cases of abuse, the treatments are permitted, but they decided to make a public statement and leave the state anyway. I said, that is a hoax.
It was not a public statement.
Well, but that's my point.
No, rape and incest exemptions are non-actionable. This is like well documented with abortion activists. How long do you think it takes to prove a rape or incest case before you're able to use that carve out to actually get an abortion?
Doesn't it depend on how the law is written? Do you have to prove it, or does it have to be alleged?
I mean, first of all,
let me just answer that
one
point
of the
real quick so we can clarify the thing on.
Sure.
I never said it was a hoax that the girl was abused.
Okay.
That is incorrect.
But honestly, this is a part and parcel of what you do is you put that kind of statement out there and then you put caveats in to protect yourself.
Sorry, Emma, but like,
but
me saying that
what like the whole. I kind of go back. I want to hear what he said again so I can remember.
Yeah. I mean, we honestly, we should pull up that video. We should pull out that video of what he said.
Yeah.
Of the law, they decided to seek it elsewhere. And I said, that is a hoax. I didn't say that it was a hoax that the girl was abused. I said, if
okay, pause it.
They could have sought treatment in state under the exemption. I think it was Ohio, right?
He's saying that the story of the woman getting abused is a hoax.
Yes.
So like, not that, right? So that is, again, which is a lie. And that's absolutely intentionally misleading his audience to create the impression. And so now he has to back it up and say, no, I'm just doing a like vague partisan media critique.
Yeah, it's that the libs got triggered about this story when she could have exploited the rape and incest exemption laws within Ohio, which again, I am trying to say to him, they're non-actionable, so she couldn't have exploited them because you are unable to prove a rape or incest case in the time that would be necessary to get an abortion. That is what I'm trying to get him on here, but here we go.
A political point is the hoax, not that the child was abused.
How does that constitute a hoax, Tim?
So, like, let's say there's a what's a good example of this? No, I'm laws are admitted, but they decided to make a public statement and leave the state anyway. I said that is a hoax.
It was not a public statement.
Well, but that's my point.
No, rape and incest exemptions are non-actionable. This is like well documented with abortion activists. How long do you think it takes to prove a rape or incest case before you're able to use that carve out to actually get an abortion?
Doesn't it depend on how the law is written? Do you have to prove it, or does it have to be alleged?
I mean, first of all,
let me just answer that point real quick so we can clarify the thing on.
Sure.
I never said it was a hoax that the girl was abused.
Okay.
That is incorrect.
But honestly, this is a part and parcel of what you do is you put that kind of statement out there and then you put caveats.
Like, it's not that she was abused, it's that she wasn't allowed to seek an abortion.
Yeah.
What?
I didn't even catch that in real time. Yeah. It's in to protect yourself.
Like but saying that someone manipulating a story for political gain is a hoax is
it's not a manipulation. That is the kind of thing that's going to continue to happen as abortion restrictions happen throughout the country.
It was
a particularly egregious example used to shine light on broader restrictions on abortion in this country. I mean, it's an opinion, but you haven't retracted it. It's false.
It's not false. If there is a story and the story is exaggerated or manipulated in an effort to sway people into believing one political faction over the other, you are engaging in a hoax.
I mean, isn't
that is what Tim did.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he did by calling it a hoax. He did it specifically because of the anti-choice movement in this country. So he can talk about, actually, I'm pro-choice, didn't you? You guys didn't cover me arguing with this pro-life person. Because, Tim, your work speaks for itself.
Yeah. I mean, he was attempting to provide a counter-narrative to a incredibly vile example of what abortion restrictions really mean. And then pretending like the left talking about this story or Democrats talking about this story was a hoax because it didn't provide the context that actually was not even viable or relevant to the story that he does in order to smooth the edges of the brutality of abortion restrictions.
Yeah, it's not even context. It's like, again, like red herrings. The things about like, what about exceptions, this or that? Like, again, like you said, non-actionable and actual justice warrior. It's funny. He like wanted education at that point. Like, doesn't it depend on how it's, bro, do some fucking reading.
Yeah, exactly.
into believing one political faction over the other, you are engaging in a hoax.
I mean, isn't that what you guys do when you post like extreme videos of crime and things like
We
that?
don't do that. What are you talking about?
I mean, you respond to videos that. That's basically it. But that was really, really early on in the debate. Probably around 10 minutes in, I was trying to get aggressive early on. And this was what. Yeah, let's watch it. Let's watch Tim's own words on this. July 14th, 2022. Here we go.
It's possible that the little girl would not have been able to get the services she needed because there's no way she could handle this pregnancy. It's sad that the life of the baby will be terminated, but probably would be considered to be not viable anyway. Now, look, there's a middle ground here, and I think Daily Mail hits on it. There's no guarantee she would have gotten the services, but hold on there a minute. Why didn't the left report the rape? Why didn't they go in Ohio to abortion services, Planned Parenthood? Why didn't they say, we want a medical exception for this and make it a pressing public policy issue that they would have won on? I think the issue is the reason it played out the way it did, the reason it was not reported, is that the left would have lost. I will say this.
His question is, why didn't they turn the situation of this child into a political propaganda vehicle for abortion at large?
Yeah.
That is an insane thing to say.
Insane.
This one's not a clear-cut hoax in the sense that someone made up a fake story. It's a hoax in the manufacture of the story to a certain degree. It is possible. The little girl would have went to the hospital and they would have said, no, you're carrying this baby, we won't do it. And the government would have said no. But I really, really doubt it. You think anyone in politics in Ohio is going to accept a 10-year-old rape victim being forced to carry a baby?
Yes.
That is just so far beyond reproach. You can already see.
Yes, and this is the
story
denial of the actual implications of their policies. It can't actually, like, they have to act like the libs are freaking out over nothing. But this happens, and it's not. And the reason why the Democrats can't, when this happens, make that unfortunate child the propaganda vehicle is because it happens all the time. And they would be making propaganda vehicles out of raped kids all over the place.
Yeah.
It was presumed to be false. David Yost says, well, you don't have to leave. We would take care of this. If the left reported the crime, if the left went to Planned Parenthood and said, we want the abortion, it would have happened. And there'd be no story. There'd be no PR campaign. And the right would have said, see, the system works. Imagine what would happen if a little girl went to a clinic and they denied her. And then the left went, look at what's happening. That would have been a powerful, powerful smack in the face of what was happening with these bills, with these heartbeat bills. There's a reason why they didn't try, because the greater possibility was medical exemption. There's no rape kit. There were no criminal charges, not until now. Why didn't anyone, knowing this girl, report this? This is why I say, ladies and gentlemen, I do believe it is a hoax. Now, as to my previous statements, I want to make sure I clarify. I don't like the vague natures of this. There is a possibility that a little girl, a family might say,
all right, this is a caveat.
Go to the hospital.
So, yeah, I mean, exactly. we heard what the point I wanted to make here. This is the quote. There's no rape kit. There were no criminal charges, not until now. Why didn't anyone knowing this girl report this? This is why I say, ladies and gentlemen, I do believe it is a hoax. That is the quote from Tim Pool.
And the very key point is, like, if this actually were true, it would be a huge hit against the heartbeat bills. Tim is a propagandist on behalf of the right wing when they do that sort of stuff. And I don't know if, like, Ian, the young guy who kind of stood up for you, know that, but he should know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
He should know that there will be a permanent sort of coherence, whatever you want to call it, between Tim and his efforts and his coverage of these stories and whatever the GOP needs.
100%. Sam's crush-proof seed sack says, You all are missing that he begins his conclusion conditionally by saying if, when he presents that as a counter to Emma's point, he's putting up a straw man. Secondly, he uses an appeal to authority fallacy by citing stats out of context. Poole doesn't argue, he shits out word salad. It's gish gallop. It's an effort to overwhelm you with facts and figures while not really saying anything at all. Charlie Sheeher, Tim has to engage in hypotheticals because if he engaged with reality, people would see how dumb his takes are. Side note, I love the beginning when you pointed out he upholds capitalism, and then he tried to rebut it by proceeding to describe his operation as providing a product exactly like a capitalist. Yes, that's true. Go on.
We had a interesting super chat, I believe, earlier, and I'm not able to confirm this, but I do have the screenshot here. So we did see yesterday that Tim Pool's dad, I believe at Tim Pool's dad YouTube channel.
Yes, he did. He had some really nice. Well, he endorsed the coup.
Yeah, he said he's not sure what is accomplished by some of this stuff, but you did a great job, and you should have your own show. And another member of the Pool household has chimed in saying,
"Wow,
Lisa Pool with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Lisa. Emma, you did a phenomenal job on my brother's show. I really love watching you hand it to him."
Well, thank you, Lisa. I mean, Lisa, I hope that you are the real Tim Pool's sister. I'm curious what happened to him. I guess he made a lot of money, but like you and your dad
talked about it a little bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think I've seen some clips of her on social media talking about. I mean, both people not very happy with the route Tim Pool's gone down.
Well, Lisa, I appreciate the kind words. Thank you for the super chat. And also, thank you for having like decent politics from what I've heard. And you and your dad standing up for what's right, even if your brother's lost his way.
Yeah, I'm glad you and your dad have somebody. And, it's just, I think generally people are good. And 2 out of 3 out of the Pool household, I think, that I know of, look that way.
Yeah, and I responded a little bit to some criticism about me even doing the debate on social media, and essentially just saying like this is what happens when you go on fascist platforms. They'll just smear you as a pedophile. Yeah. I knew that something like that was probably going to happen, but the reason I did what I did is that I knew I would go in there and it would be my only time I'd ever go on. I went in there with the intention of not getting invited back because I was going to be adversarial. I was going to challenge him on his platform, call out his lies, call out his debate tactics that are meant to obscure the reality of what he's actually advocating for, and leave. And the reason he's calling me a pedophile is because I did that as a warning shot to any other leftist that might come on and challenge him in that way.
Yep. He has to make you regret it, and he's just dumb enough that it took him 3 days to realize he needs to lean heavily onto the sling mud portion.
Right, and just to Matt's point, like, people are fundamentally good. I don't think a majority of his audience
I think a lot of them are pretty bad.
Well, no, I was about to say, I don't think a majority of his audience is going to be swayed by me coming on. But I do think that there's a possibility that there are a few people that start to question it, even if it's not immediate, there are cracks.
Indeed.
And we have people that call into the Majority Report, might be someone watching right now, who felt that they were de-radicalized by seeing Sam and Michael's work in the past, maybe even mine since I joined in 2020, that cause them to question because we directly engage with these ideas and it gets into their algorithm. And so that was my goal. I mean, it's also fun and it's good for my career to be seen in that space. Like that's, there is of course a self-interest involved in it too. Like I want to take that next step in my career, but for the most part, the self-interest is pretty tertiary because it's like, if I was truly just doing it self-interestedly, I'd try to get invited on as many shows as I can. And that's not the case.
Yeah. And we have like proof of concept with that in the sense that we do have callers every so often who do call and are like, I was a avid Jimmy Dore fan, or I was an avid Steven Crowder fan, an avid Tim Pool fan, that through the algorithm I stopped watching those shows and started watching more left-leaning shows. So like there's a project there for actual people who actually have who this actually has effects on. It's not just completely theoretical that, someone might chance upon and be like, you know what, I'm not a Republican anymore. I'm not a conservative anymore. I'm not like a crank anymore. Like there actually are people that we have spoken to that have said this to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think like we've had a consistent position on this. Autumn Leaves, member of moderator on the chat, said they found the show because of Michael's debate of Sargon of Akkad. And you know, there's like the two poles of the debate. Like one is the naive debate lord pole of it, which is like, oh yeah, let's just I brushed up on vaccines. Let's talk to Bobby Kennedy. And like, I don't think that you get a participation medal for simply being on media with people who have notoriety. But when you approach it the way you did, or the way like Sam did, where there's a contention, and I'll even make allowance for people who are going to show a little bit of respect to say maybe Russell Brand on the hopes of getting invited back. But like, I also do understand like the media is not necessarily like we get too naive about the use of about media. Like, I believe in the Enlightenment, I believe in free discussion and the Republic of Letters and all that good stuff. But also, this media was funded by like slave catchers who wanted. Here's a classified. One of my slaves ran away. It's been used to demonize whole populations. Like, I have a media studies background. I think fundamentally, the impact of this is probably negative, and we exist here to try to blunt that weapon against whether it's unions or teachers or whatever like that. So I understand why people are like, just don't participate, because you're just adding to a system that's a weapon.
Right.
But I understand that that's a concern you need to like go into it with, like you did. But it's not the overriding like thing, because we do see the other end of it where people are like, major tech platforms are suggesting these freaks to me, and I assumed that their stuff had some validity, and it actually turned out it didn't, because I heard you talk to libertarians or this or that.
Right, exactly. It depends on how you approach it. It's all about the context of what you do in those situations. Lick Butts Not Boots says, just wanted to say Zippix toothpicks are actually helping me drastically reduce how much I vape I'm consuming. Looking forward to completely weeding it out of my life. As usual, MR promotes genuinely great products. I'm so glad to hear that. The Earl of Grey, I'm fairly convinced that Tim thought he was going to charm you, Emma. Also, that you're the only woman that he has talked to besides his sister. He definitely has strong incel vibes.
This sentence.
She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
The poker with the boys thing, it reminds me of being a high schooler. Not where I wanted to be on Friday night. Maybe with a more male-leaning group. And kind of wondering, like, look, this is cool.
Like, yeah.
Pushing poker chips into the center with some guys who were not getting really socialized, but you got to get out of there.
Yeah, what year was that, Matt?
That was probably like 2005.
And how old were you?
A sophomore in high school.
Okay. All right.
Really into poker.
You were into skating?
And no, I wasn't actually. But I do think like I'm seeing a lot of Tim Pool sort of fans. And the sex ed stuff, I think, shows a lot of like, oh, these are people for whom that point was a crisis. And it was probably because of their parents. That like this moment of like, okay, we're learning about sex and what condoms are is some sort of scary thing, or like that's who we're dealing with here. And we're dealing with a bunch of guys who went through that and also are extremely under socialized because, and the big part of this to me is how much people have to work, right? Like you constantly have to serve a boss, devote your life to a boss, maybe move cities for a new boss with better pay there. And like, we act, and technology is of course a problem. I'm sure dating apps haven't been super great for it, but I think if we all had like 10 hours more a day to socialize and maybe some more like places that don't take $10, like I don't know, skate parks, and it's an interesting thing to have a skate park there because that's a area for you to, you know, group together in public,
right?
And we have increasingly few of those, right?
And for them, I'm sure it's a point of connection. The guys that hang out there, and that's good.
And we need more of that in society that
Yes.
isn't just underwritten by lying propagandists making a bunch of money, being opportunistic in media.
Floyd the Barber, also who wants to play poker in the early afternoon. He even Chowder says, well, only a pedophile would turn down poker with da boys, with a Z. To more from the 5. I found this show 2 years ago. There was nothing in particular that led me to you, except that I was getting into the leftist media around at the time and had been a TYT member for a couple of months. It's a coincidence that I latched on as soon as the Crowder H3 Sam debate, but it provided great appeal. Sad that I missed all of Brooks's time, but glad I'm here now. Well, we're glad you're here, too, as well. Affluence and wretchedness. So it's a hoax to get a 10-year-old rape victim on an abortion in a way that prioritizes the girl's well-being and privacy over a political point. But it would be okay with Tim if the child had been paraded around as an example of cruelty of abortion bans and subjected to public scrutiny and harassment. Very chill guy. Stockholder syndrome. How dare you say my show attracts neo-Nazis? I bet your puppet master Jew boss told you to say that.
I mean, that was a panic. That was a full-on panic to say, like, okay, now you are saying things. I don't even think you know what you are saying.
It's because I threw him off by bringing my computer into the studio.
But Sam
so he thought I was getting a communication.
Also, I don't think Sam would have brought that up.
No, he didn't.
Yeah.
And we spoke about some things that he thought would be a good idea for me to approach. And
Sam
that was
wanted
one
to
I
stick
came
to
up.
policy.
That was one I came up with myself. Right,
Yeah.
I know. Right. Calling from a 541 area code. 541. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, me?
Yeah, this is you.
Awesome. Hold on, let me take you off my headphones.
Thank you.
Okay, hey. So I've been trying to call in for a bit. Sorry, I'm working right now, so
No
I'm
problem.
gonna walk to a safe spot. So
Who's this? Where are you calling from?
this is Matt from Central Oregon.
Matt from Central Oregon.
Yeah. So I just wanted to bring I just want to share a story about abortion.
Okay.
And it kind of touches on some topics that aren't talked about enough. And it happened. Hold on, I'm getting in my car too.
It's okay.
I don't know what that leanings of my client are. So my partner and I, we got pregnant. Back in like 2012 or 2011, we lived in Hawaii, and thank God we lived in Hawaii because we were really happy. But we learned, you don't tell anybody for the first 12 weeks because that's what we learned. Anything can happen in the first 12 weeks of pregnancy. So you don't go out and post it on Facebook or whatever, and you want to kind of wait until things are that 12-week appointment where things are. You find out if anything's wrong or whatever. So we had our 12-week appointment and everything was fine. And then we went in for 13 weeks because there was a delay in a sonogram or something. And they found a small bubble in the back of the fetuses where it would be neck. It was super tiny. They showed us it wasn't, a person or anything like that. It was just this little organism. And there's a little bubble. And they're like, oh, that could be anything. It could be, anywhere from your kid might have a cleft lip to where he may be autistic to where it may be chromosomal disorder or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So immediately we were scared. And so we, kept going back. And every appointment, it got worse. Sorry. So it got worse. It was, there was deformities happening. The heart was enlarged. And all this stuff, an arm coming out of the wrong area, the nose and the side of the head, and it was horrible.
I'm sorry.
And yeah, so the thing is that this took weeks and weeks and weeks to really figure out, because it's like, okay, how bad is it going to be? Do we want to move forward with a kid who might have autism or something like that? It turned out to be trisomy 13, which is a chromosomal disorder. So we were past the 20-week abortion ban. We were well past that. And when we found out that they had an enlarged heart and there was almost 0% chance that it would even survive the birth or to birth or, in after birth or anything like that. So, and then my partner was super concerned about why this happened. So she wanted to find out, is there anything we can do? I mean, is there something wrong with one of us? So then they had to do further tests. So we went, I'm thinking almost to 28 weeks. And it was like, my partner was like I can't even tell you what it was like to witness, what she was going through.
Yeah.
She was like a zombie. I don't hate to say that, but she was like a zombie. She had no emotion. She had this thing that was so happy, and it went so wrong, so drastically wrong. And it was like the hardest thing in the world. Now, where I'm from, I'm not from Hawaii. I lived there for a while. Now I'm in Oregon. But where I'm originally from, the Planned Parenthood there would be people outside, protesting and calling me murderers and stuff like that. And I can't tell you what I have done had I been encountered with people like that. When my partner, was going through this kind of, turmoil, she has never been the same. We ended up finding out it was just a 1 in 3,014 chance that our baby was going to be born this way, or it was going to, the fetus was going to have this happen, and it was 1 in 3,014. We're fine. And we now have a daughter who's amazing, and it's, light of our life, but my partner is never going to be the same because of what she had to endure through all of that. And, talking about, time frames on abortion bans and stuff like that is like, I understand, but there's always got to be, there's got to be exceptions for these types of situations because,
absolutely,
maybe I wouldn't have my daughter right now if we weren't able to to go a little further. And
well, thank God your wife was able to undergo this procedure so that her body and everything, as you say, you don't know if you would have been able to have your daughter
right.
So I think a majority of people who have abortions have children or do have children at some point, if I'm not mistaken.
Or want them.
Do you mind
or want them, like we wanted them.
Yeah, right. If you just don't mind double checking that statistic, if a majority of people who have abortions are later have kids or have had kids. Because the reality is that there is a really, really deep and dark undertone to what is being implied here. And that is that if the woman is not producing a healthy baby, social Darwinism, like time to essentially let her go through that because she's not the perfect earthen vessel for the seed of her partner and thus should be punished for it regardless. Like even those exceptions. Right. That is the...
And our daughter now is completely healthy.
Yeah.
She's amazing. She's smart. She's artistic. She's artistic. Sorry, I don't mean to... But she's just an amazing girl. And I mean, I was able to be a stay-home dad for a while. And it was just an incredible experience raising her. And, to think that there's people out there that want to step in and, not allow people to make those decisions on their own for their own body and everything. And if you ask my spouse, she was probably, she's pro-choice for everybody, but for her, she never wanted to have an abortion.
Totally.
She never would have, but this was like the only instance, like we were thinking of, the possibilities, and it was like, okay, well, if it's disabled in some way, can we afford that? Can we afford the health care? There was so many decisions going through our head, and then, the development just kept getting worse and worse and worse. So we never had to come to those conclusions, but,
that's the horrible thing about, that's the other part of like full child care, supportive parents would include a situation where you're not looking at the ledger to decide if you can support having an autistic or otherwise disabled child. And that is the ethics that I think are very hairy. But like, back to the question that this is from Slate, it's from 2011, but this is the numbers I've seen. The women with children have more abortions than anyone else, and by an increasingly wide margin.
Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, well, Matt, thank you for sharing your story. I'm so sorry that you both had to go through that and that your wife did as well. But this is just another prime example that you have to empower people to make these decisions with their doctors. There's no substitution. And every carve out, Every caveat from Republican legislatures is just meant to obscure the real brutality of what they're advocating for. Because even if the rape and incest exemptions that are non-actionable, in some perfect world, rape and incest was proven in like 10 days and that could happen. Even if that were the case, there are always going to be cases like what you dealt with and your wife dealt with.
I appreciate you guys for your advocacy, and I want to tell you, Emma, that I'm pro-trans in every way, but and another thing you changed my mind on was the sports women, trans women, men in sports, and I always kind of thought like, hey, my sisters were always super athletic and into sports, and
right.
I kind of for a while there was like, I kind of understand why people would not want trans, women in playing girl sports. And then it's just like, it's a fucking sport. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
It's a sport. It's a sport. We're not talking livelihoods. We're talking high school sports. We're talking college sports. Who cares? Let them play. Let everybody play. It's a game. There's very few people who win, So what, to let everybody, you changed my mind so much on this because I really understood their argument, but now it's just like, it's a game. It's a sport. Come on.
The reason they talk about it is because people who are otherwise accepting and on board with trans rights have that sort of feeling about it. That's the reason they dwell on it. It's not because they give a shit about women's sports. They make fun of the WNBA every chance they get.
Yeah. Thanks for the call, Matt.
All right. Left is best.
Left is best. Should we do, what do we want to do, this Jordan Peterson thing?
Oh yeah, so there's Trouble in Paradise. These families on the right, a lot of splits over ideology, and I'll just say, of course, generally will always support Tim Pool's dad and his sister over Tim Pool. Did not expect to be supporting Mireya Peterson over her dad Jordan. So there was an exchange, and this is still up. I confirmed it, but Dr. JP, doing his standard thing. I don't know if this is new to Mireya Peterson, but Dr. Jordan Peterson quote tweeted H. Pearl Davis saying, "Outside of reproduction, society would function fine without women."
Oh, cool. And
is
that a woman making that case?
It is a woman, yes.
Oh, so
this is why it's interesting.
This is the final boss in the pick me game. Anyway.
Yes, I've been seeing a few of those pick me's. Literally, one woman on YouTube, sort of like their TikTok type of thing, say the first caption was "pick me," and men, you have something to be upset about. But anyway, This is H. Pearl Davis. Outside of reproduction, society would function fine without women. Jordan Peterson, but who would keep the decorative pillow manufacturers in business? Probably you, Jordan.
I don't know who would keep the Joker suit suit industry in business without Jordan B. Peterson.
But one Mireya Peterson, whose views on a lot of other things, I'll not co-sign.
Buddies with Andrew Tate, for example.
Yeah. As far as I don't know, I know if there's been movement on that front. Not super interested. But anyway, here's what Mireya said to her dad. "Your business would definitely take a hit, Dad. That's true. Somehow, a lot of women, generally older, like Jordan Peterson. This is a resentful woman who hates other women, tells them they're useless after 35, and continues to propagate red-pilled lies. Just because the left is crazy doesn't mean people like this aren't."
Well, Mireya, I've got news for you. This is the natural conclusion of what your father... I was almost about to say husband. Sometimes the vibes are a little off. What he advocates for, which is when women are made to be property, that was something that your father advocated for. He said, well, I'm just engaging in hypotheticals, but maybe women would be better protected from rape if they were still the property of their man because, I have no historical understanding of marital rape and rape that happened beforehand because, I'm just trying to make a case that is completely nonsensical. But, this is the natural conclusion of saying that women are probably better off as male property. Then we're talking about an entire gender of people and
He
their
literally-
uselessness as
Yeah.
autonomous individuals.
Like he was literally saying, I don't know if the experiment where we allow women into the workplace has panned out. right? Like
Because of the rosiness of the cheeks.
this is not an accidental. This is been foretold.
Mhm.
Do you guys want to know a fun fact?
Yeah.
On that social media profile of that shooter in Allen, Texas, this is the video that was time coded. Besides the Tim video with Elijah Schaefer, was a video of Pearl Davis over here talking to Nick Fuentes.
Oh, look at that.
Interesting. This-
Buddies. This is called synergy as well, in terms of like right-wing reactionaries. Yeah, that is that is what Jordan Peterson, the doctor, but maybe not for long.
Part of growing up
That's
is
what he
realizing your parents are humans like you and not sort of like authorities like God. And I think Michaela's probably going through that now. I think probably often happens in your 20s. And it'd be tough. Your dad's a renowned public intellectual, I guess. And he's stupid as hell on stuff like this. It must be a absolute mindfuck.
On stuff like this?
I mean, any sort of political topic, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, the guy appeals to incels on purpose because he has chosen a very cynical path for monetizing his platform. And that is not to steer young men who might feel led astray towards the path of making the harder case to them, which is that women are human beings just like you, and you have to kind of buck up and understand them as complete human beings, as opposed to people under your wing or a part of you or a part of your property. He steers them down an antisocial path and then exploits their misery and says things like, well, if you are non-binary, how can I know how to categorize you in a social interaction? How do I know how to approach you if you're neither male nor female? This really just throws a wrench into your socialization. No, that's because your conception of what it means to socialize and connect with other people is incredibly stilted. If you were to do the harder work of making the case to your audience that these are just human beings, gender be damned, then they wouldn't have to have an approach of going up to somebody with a preset category of how they're going to be interacting with them. He encourages antisocial disconnection and then pretends like he's solving their problems. It's a very sick game. And in the end, Michaela Peterson's understanding that the natural conclusion of what he advocates for is like the deepest misogyny possible.
This is interesting. Who is Hannah Pearl Davis? Hannah Pearl Davis, who goes by Pearl, is a 26-year-old YouTuber known for her anti-feminist content. With her misogynistic viewpoint, even earning her the nickname the female Andrew Tate, she has gained a large number of followers in recent months because of the Tate arrest. She's been doing pick-me stuff. On December 31st, Pearl had blah, 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 a bunch of followers. Ironically, her mother previously served on the board of directors for UN Women USA, which supports the United Nations Gender Equality Program, as per Insider. Davis has previously credited right-wing political commentators Ben Shapiro and Thomas Sowell as her inspiration for wanting to... We have a woman inspired by Ben Shapiro, folks. I mean, this is...
LMFAO.
This is a hugely rare specimen here.
Yeah.
I believe somebody mentioned something about her dad, which I'm trying to look up as well.
Well, a lot of this just seems like rebellion, where everyone the stuck in adolescence of like rebelling against your parents, I guess, is but anyway, that is that. Graham Page, Pearl got embarrassed on Ethan Klein's show, would recommend a watch. Will do. Baltimore Live show, not sure of the statistics, but my mother had multiple abortions before my older brother was born. I'm one of 5 kids she and my father had. Maya says, Peterson argues that there is no patriarchy and then also argues that women could not be protected unless they are seen as property of men. Worst of all, he misdirects the very men he's claiming to help and alienated them from true sources of support. That's the word I was looking for, alienation. Talk about grooming. I agree. Dylan from Australia, pizza for breakfast at 4 a.m., listening to the Majority Report and playing Destiny. My sleep cycle may be broken, but life is good. Hey, pizza for breakfast. We've
cold pizza for breakfast.
We've all been there, guys. We've drunkenly ordered a pizza. There's still some left, and then you eat it in the morning. We've all been there. Let's admit it. We've all been there. No?
One time.
Just me?
I eat it cold, I tell you.
Yeah, I like it cold. Yeah.
One time in college, I was really sober, and it was like 2 or 3 a.m. and one of my roommates walked out of their room, and just like my door was open. And they were like, "Bradley, are you eating a pizza in bed?" And I just was like, I looked over and I was like, I just had a full pizza box under my covers.
I mean, you got, sleep with it. It's your best friend.
Absolutely cozy.
If anybody's ever in Fargo, they got a place called Pizza Patrol, and I used to literally buy one of those and take it home straight and put it in the fridge and just chew on it cold.
So you like it cold more?
Look, I do like hot pizza, but I really like cold. Especially the right kind of cold pizza is super good.
The definitive ranking for me is hot pizza fresh, cold pizza, bottom of the barrel is reheated pizza.
Yeah.
It sucks. Comrade Swoop, my girlfriend and I have a 10-month-old. We also work at the same place. Usually my mom or her mom babysits while we were at work, but due to a work trip for my mom and a sudden medical episode that her mom suffered recently, she's had to watch our son in her office. Originally, our boss made an exemption, but an intern has complained that he can't work around babies, and now she's banned from returning to work unless she gets a babysitter. I've worked at this place for almost 9 years. And the guy, oh wait, no, that's somebody else. I thought that there was a continuation. That is insane. Thames Darwin, solidarity with the caller from Hawaii. My ex-wife and I had a similar experience through earlier in her pregnancy, non-viable pregnancy because of a genetic polysomny. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. And she had to have a D&C because she didn't spontaneously abort. It was a long time ago, but it definitely strained our now former marriage. Thank God we didn't have to face the anti-choice morons or medieval laws.
I mean, people, like, there's just, if you're anti-choice, you are anti-reality. Like, I know somebody from North Dakota who, she wasn't politically anti-choice, but personally said, like, I'll never get an abortion. And ended up having birth complications and requiring one.
Mm-hmm.
And now every time that one of these bills gets passed that would have implicated her ability to do that, she has to be political about it.
Yep. Yeah. Gutfeld? Which one is that? What number? Number 6? No, that's different. Number 7. Oh, okay. Here we go. So
the caller reminded me of this clip when he was just talking about how you changed his mind about trans people in sports because he was like, so what? It's just a game and it's not professional, like that type of thing.
Right. The broader societal goal of including trans people in society and making trans children in particular feel accepted and that they can do whatever they want to do is more important than small test cases, right? But they choose to exploit that because it makes certain people who might have participated in women's sports or who know girls that do sports, it makes them uncomfortable. It's the definition of a wedge issue. But I'm happy to hear I changed his mind a little bit. Not happening over at Fox News. Here is Greg Gutfeld talking about pronouns on the 5, the new primetime. Wait, no, it's not Gutfeld. I always confuse him. Wait, no, Gutfeld is the primetime. 10 p.m. Yeah, the new the host who has supplanted Laura Ingraham as one of the 3 the 3 primetime hosts.
Yeah, and this is the 5 tackling a really big issue, which is an op-ed in the Atlantic about how there are too many options at the grocery store, and then Gutfeld gets to vamp about pronouns from here.
Oh, perfect.
Now, is this guy a genius or what? All right. So, I'm going to start with you, Greg. This is really a first world complaint. You know, poor me. I have so many options. I mean, is this something to even complain about?
It's hilarious because apparently, we have too many options for food, but not enough for pronouns, right? This guy, I doubt this guy would ever write a piece and says, what's with 72 pronouns? Look, this is actually a decent point.
Can you pause it for a sec? Just go back to the one shot of him. Why is he sitting like that? Like, this guy is the douchiest dude. Seriously here. I mean...
Not for nothing, he's also like 5'3".
I mean, well...
No offense.
No offense to anybody, but the Napoleon complex is sometimes real.
Options for food, but not enough for pronouns, right? This guy, I doubt this guy would ever write a piece and says, what's with 72 pronouns? Look, this is actually a decent point. You walk into a supermarket, it's huge, but the response is very simple. So? That would have killed the article. It's like, if I want to do this piece. I go into the supermarket. It's huge. If I were the editor, I go, so go to a smaller store. What's your problem? I mean, what's your problem? This is are you on some kind of drug? I'm sure it's like a lot of people have.
So
interesting point that Gutfeld's making about the groceries.
So
what?
So
There
what?
are so many options. So what? Go to a smaller grocery store.
Yeah. You could apply that analysis to something you just brought up.
The thing he just
Think
mentioned.
really
in
hard,
comparison.
Greg. Think really, really hard with that brain of yours.
I was just so fascinated for that to be his next point when I'm like, do you not realize the comparison you're making? Or
especially because I don't really know what he's talking about the endless pronouns. We've got he, him, we've got she, her, we've got they, them. Sometimes there are other
or exotic ones.
Yeah, exotic ones, but they're not really
Which, I want to say,
used very frequently.
And are most likely probably used most often in frickin' Fox News or MSNBC or New York Times.
Corporate
workspaces, diversity, equity, inclusion workshops or trainings that make these guys go fucking crazy when they are literally not used in practical terms or in real life.
It is like, it's not news, conservatives, that sometimes meetings suck. And corporate speak that's trying to protect them from legal liability is lame. And that kind of stuff is nothing that nobody wants to sit through. But how have you made it your entire politics? Because that's garbage and hilarious. This is the reactionary mind.
It's sad that it shows how much consumption dominates our idea of what politics is, to the point, and I think there is some sort of pathology here. I don't think it's that explanatory, but like this choice in the supermarket is simulated. The idea that like Tropicana and Minute Maid are that different, is ridiculous. I mean, the bigger problem with grocery stores to me is the price of essentials and how we say, hey, if you're on food stamps, you can't get hot food. Like this other stuff about like there being too much choice. I think there is a problem where I think you see this with the way people want us to be overly excited about every entrance into the Democratic Party primary. And it's like, you want me to get excited about Minute Maid has a new flavor because all this stuff sucks.
Yeah.
And you know what? It might be better than the Republican. But like, I don't know, like this sort of choice, this sort of deliberating and arguing over consumer choice, it's very peripheral to
It's
me.
their conception of politics, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
right, exactly.
that's a very conservative conception.
Yeah. But I mean, as long as you want to extend that to say people have the right to choose their own medical care, then we don't have a beef here.
Lefty from the Midwest, a sad fact about climate change is that wealthy countries won't cough up the necessary funds for poor countries to alleviate poverty substantially. This century will be a terrible one of the global South. Yeah, I know.
Lost damage, yep.
Lawful Waffle, to all the people suggesting Tim should have stayed to seduce Tim and film it, I say no, not cool. Okay. That is a stomach churning thought. Lawful Waffle. My God. Emma Jordy, coup supporter. First Emma coup. Sam Dimtool is next. Out here collecting shows like Infinity Stones. Left is best. Thank you. Jazz Apple, Emma, you crushed it. Tim is such a tool. The idea that Sam is banned because he's a dick and is so incredibly lazy. Guess what, Tim? You're a dick. Matt Walsh, Crowder, Knowles, Tucker, you're all dicks. Horrible excuses to avoid a debate. What a sad human.
What they mean is that you don't respect me.
Yep.
And we don't.
We don't. Sorry. Duncan in Hostop. Duncan, Idaho stop. Whoa. Oh, he's talking to this disgusting editor in chief, Cassandra. Oh, you're talking about Tim. The Earl of Grey. I'm fairly convinced that Tim thought he was going to charm you, Emma, and that you're the only woman who has talked to besides his sister. Okay, we already read that one. Dave from Jamaica. The neoliberal world order is the illusion of choice. Very well said. Yep. Aesop's foibles. D-Bag Santis has stated that he will end birthright citizenship if he becomes president. I'm not sure if you covered that yet. I have not, but yeah. I mean,
good thing he's not gonna be.
Yeah, exactly. What should we do here? Should we do this Trump spokesperson thing? We should probably touch on this, right? So the fallout within Republican circles is commencing after the audio that Mark Meadows' ghostwriter took of Trump in 2021 shows that Trump was bragging about showing off declassified documents, and that he, in the clip, essentially, he is saying, well, I didn't declassify them. I probably shouldn't show you.
Look, he said, I wanted to start a war with Iran to stay in office, but actually look at these documents. They have the plan for the war.
And apparently, of the documents that he's being indicted over, this is not one of them. So in terms of it being directly connected to a legal liability, for him, it's not as has been stated, really. But what it does do is it shows that Trump was aware of what he could and could not do when it came to classified and declassified documents, declassifying them and classifying them, right? That part does undercut his defense. Now he's come out, he talked to Semaphore on his plane, and he was like, it was bravado. It was bravado. It reminds me of when he was like...
It's the smartest way to him to go.
Oh, totally. But it reminds me of it's just locker room talk.
Oh, yeah.
He got a PR person who said this to him, and he's going to like insincerely play this out, right? In public.
It was it was Mar-a-Lago office room talk.
Yeah, this was his response, Trump, briefly, and then we'll play his spokesperson talking at a press conference when he was doing a campaign event in New Hampshire.
You're not concerned then with your own voice on those recordings?
My voice was fine. What did I say wrong on those recordings? I didn't even see the recording. All I know is I did nothing wrong. We had a lot of papers stacked up. In fact, you could hear the rustle of the paper, and nobody said I did anything wrong, other than the fake news, which of course is Fox too.
Woo! Are there any other recordings that we should be concerned of?
I don't know of any recordings that you should be concerned with, because I don't do things wrong. I do things right. I'm a legitimate person.
I'm a legitimate person. I'm real. I'm as real as it gets. Don't call me fake. Don't call me fake, bitch. I'll throw some wine in your face. I mean, this is real.
It's probably not the time to stick it to Fox News, though.
Probably not, but they don't even care. Brett Baer just had him on, and he'll be on again.
That's true, yeah.
He'll be on again.
He apparently has been raging against Fox on True Social recently.
It's working the refs. I mean, he's really trying to get them.
He's like really pissed for them to even be like, even entertaining, like maybe he did do something. Jonathan Turley's a little skeptical of Bill Barr on. Like,
well, he has an understanding of like these guys. They're simpatico in the way that they respond to the mob. Like they know Trump is a crowd surfer. He serves his audience. We played him at that. I forget what it was, but it was maybe in Georgia or something when he was giving that speech about trans people, and he was like, look at this, like they didn't even know who trans people were 5 years ago. Now they're eating out of the palm of my hand. I'm paraphrasing, but
like you barely stood up for taxes.
Yeah, he understands how to give the people what they want, and Fox News is super driven by their audience, and so he's getting his audience, his fans, to be primed to be disciplining Fox to get what he wants. And it's effective because Fox is as vile as he is. And then here's his spokesperson also on Fox, Alina Habba. Alina Habba, for his former attorney. She used to do parking garage litigation in New Jersey, and she can't represent him in Florida. So now she's just his press flack. Okay. What is parking garage litigation? She represented a parking garages in New Jersey.
Some of the highest stakes litigation.
Oh, maybe. I mean, it's like
this person was there 2 hours over their ticket.
And I'm not trying to stereotype, but we're talking parking lots and construction places in New Jersey and New York. It's a little
above
mobby.
board, I'm sure.
I mean, Roy Cohn was his former attorney, so he knows the kinds of people that he wants on his side. Here she is talking about what possibly could be the reason behind this news about Trump.
The evidence. So explain to me how then evidence is being leaked the week that Hunter Biden is getting indicted or misdemeanor charges for things that he should have been going to jail for, let's be honest. And if it was a Trumper, would have gone to jail for. But nobody talks about that. What do they want to talk about? Trump, submarine. Oh, I know. Release a tape. Release a tape saying what? That the Presidential Records Act allows a president to declassify documents. He is the only person that has the power to single-handedly do that. That's what the tape says.
No.
What does declassified mean? This is such a
dumb.
If they were declassified, we would all be able to see them.
Yes.
I would like to see this Iran war document. Look, I take Sam's point that the military has enough money to be doing plans about every fucking country on earth. The American people need to be privy to that information because a lot of people think it's a conspiracy theory that, say, during the Cold War, people wanted to attack America domestically and blame it on Cuba. Mm-hmm. And maybe, just maybe, it might be a little bit tougher to pass these appropriations bills every effing year to give these psychos plans to... and there's a difference with Iran because we do want to invade Iran. I don't know who wants to invade Canada. People do want to invade Iran.
John Bolton's chomping at the bit.
And I'm glad for this pissing contest. I'm glad that the prosecution of Trump has turned up this little thing about the Iran deal because it shows something kind of interesting. One, that Milley, and I don't know who's right because we don't, again, have the document because he didn't declassify it, but Milley said that he wanted to do Iran war for political gains. I'm glad to hear that coming from a general. I'm also glad to hear from a former president that the military wanted to force me to do a war with Iran. And I'll just say generally, no war with Iran.
Yes, agreed. We can't trust him though. We can't trust him.
I don't trust none of these people.
Yeah, I mean, but do I believe that there were people in the military who wanted him to go to war with Iran?
Yes.
John Bolton was in his administration.
Yep.
Of course. John Bolton, literally, it's his number one wish. If he were to ask God for one thing or ask a genie and get a wish granted, it would be to go to war with Iran. These were the kind of people that were in the administration. So I believe it to an extent, but I would also imagine that Trump, who assassinated Soleimani, which could have easily gotten us into war with Iran, was just as much on board as any of the ghouls in the deep state.
Yeah.
Read The Declassification Engine by Matthew Connolly. We had him on. We should be declassifying documents en masse. With the birth of the national security state in the 20th century, we have classified way too much stuff, blanket classification, so that there's not enough sunlight on what we do as a government. And then when people try to bring sunlight on it, you know what they do? They charge them with the Espionage Act, and they try to lock them up.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that what Trump is doing. I mean, he was asked to back to her claim there, right? She was saying that the president can declassify things. That is true. But onto the tape, he's saying, I didn't do so. That's the difference. And if Trump really wanted to declassify things and bring them to the press, I would be all for it.
Would have been great.
All for it. But that's not what he was doing.
It would have been great if you pardoned some people who exposed military secrets. Would have been great if he did a lot of things he did not do. I can't believe that we're talking about him as a whistleblower. The whistle never blew.
He swallowed the whistle.
Yeah, exactly. He's what he did is privately put the whistle in his mouth and puff his cheeks out. But the whistle nobody heard the whistle.
Yes, he pretended to blow the whistle in a wooded area with nobody in 50 miles of him. That's what it was, essentially. That's so dumb. But
Can I also just say,
sure.
I've just been learning some more about Alina Habba here.
Mm-hmm.
She joined the Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster, New Jersey in 2019, which is an 8-minute drive from her law firm, then became friends with Trump and then started representing him. And then she also represented former Real Housewife of New Jersey, Siggy Flicker, because Siggy Flicker thought that her Facebook was taken down because she wished Melania Trump a happy birthday.
That's amazing. Where is her law firm relative to Bedminster?
It's in Bedminster. It's just 8 minutes away from the course.
I mean, guys, Bedminster's, I don't know per capita, but like maybe one of the wealthiest towns in New Jersey, and it's like as conservative as it gets in New Jersey.
In other words, you're saying there's lots of white collar crime going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gorgeous area, but yeah, for assholes live there. All right. With that, we're probably going to wrap up, guys. Read some IMs and get out of here. I'm sorry that we don't have enough time for calls. I really apologize. We will take more tomorrow. Turning on the voicemail. Left is deft. Emma, your pizza opinions are suspect because I don't trust people who claim to like pizza but don't like cheese. Well, I'm sorry that you don't trust me anymore. That's why I don't like deep dish, because it's too much cheese, and too much sauce.
I'm a little bit bigger on cheese than I used to be. I didn't like it as a kid. The only time I would ever really eat it was on pizza. Like no cheeseburgers, no nothing, or sandwiches. But yeah,
I love cheese so much.
Yes, we know. People should check out that episode of ESPN. Absolutely traumatic. Yes, everyone knows about that. Custodial artist, was that Matt or Bradley's? Huh, okay. No, it was Bradley in the video of Gutfeld. Adam from Indiana. Emma, did George Santos's bail payers get released? Yes.
It was his aunt and his father.
Nothing nobody in the chat. Hey, just wanted to say Emma is getting really good at running the show.
Oh, thank you. That's nice, because I thought I was a little off today.
Oh, that's also true. But you're good enough to.
I'll be back with a vengeance tomorrow, baby. JR in Philly, as Tony Soprano said of orange juice, I like the one that says some pulp.
Exactly.
Right. You can have pulp, some pulp, no pulp. I mean, come on.
He's taking the lots of pulp. Come on, guys. What are you doing?
I mean, honestly, that's psychopath.
It's like hard mode.
Right.
A game that's not that
fun. Conservative mind virus. Sorry if I seem heated. I matched with a Z on Tinder and I am losing my damn mind. All right. Matt from Denver. Can't wait for Tim to get invited to the Pool family Thanksgiving instead of Tim.
I'll just say, I think that was a joke, but if you match with somebody with different pronouns than you were expecting when you matched with them, and you have an extreme reaction, you might want to interrogate that reaction a little bit and maybe wonder if there's some psychological reason that you need to. Basically, I think
conservative mind virus is acting as a character of a conservative. Right. Yeah. Two kids in a trench coat. Completely agree with Emma's rankings on pizza temperatures. Reheated pizza is almost as bad as that lasagna people from Chicago call pizza. Two kids in a trench coat. You are right on the money. Nah, Matt just walked out. Colin from Maryland. This show.
Because you're not having real conversations.
Colin from Maryland. This show has given me the ability to discuss politics with my politically uninterested mother. I recently heard her shutting someone down about Social Security, quote, running out, and I was so proud. That's awesome. Number 13 was hearing on Pod Save America yesterday that the Biden administration working behind the scenes has been a large factor in all these paid leave policies being implemented by rail companies recently, as this is apparently according to official union statements. Perhaps the Biden administration was playing the long game outside of the spotlight on this, and it's very interesting how little coverage of their apparent efforts has been given. Perhaps we've all been a little suckered by reactionary journalism.
I don't think so. Sorry, but I think this is a good example of the Democrats and the way that strike went out. It sacrificed trust. It literally sacrificed trust in the rank and file to the point where people who led those unions are getting voted out. Now that some is being done, and I'm not sure what unions have got it's something we will cover and we are in favor of. But that is repairing the harm that was caused. we can't like this is the way time works. We can't say like, oh, actually they had us, because there's actually no reason to really suspect that the Democrats are going to have us with regards to like, look at all the other things they're leaving on the table.
Yeah.
And so like, I don't like this, and I understand why, because people want to turn out votes for Democrats. And look, I genuinely think, yeah, the unions are saying you should vote for one party, vote for that party and keep it moving. But like, there's a reason the UAW didn't jump to endorse Biden already. And it's smart of them to do that, because they should have to work for these unions. And look, behind the scenes stuff is good, but there's a reason they prefer to do it behind the scenes rather than in a high profile strike action, because of the other message that sends, which is that's how you get the goods.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I also just, I'm not sure. I would need to look further into it, but I don't agree with it on a case-by-case basis behind the scenes, because that's probably a little bit less, and I would need to look into the contract, but a little bit less enduring than if it was to happen in public and more broadly, is my guess. But I understand what you're saying.
We will be fair about it, but I don't think that's fair to. I don't think it is. I think it's over. I think there's people that are over anxiously fair-minded, and I don't think you're right about it here. I think like the Pod Save guys are talking about how vote shaming works, and it's because what people say is true about us in the Democratic Party. That is true about the Pod Save guys. Like, they are an arm of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And, like,
I mean, I think they'd admit that.
Yeah. I mean, look at the guests they have.
Former people. Hillary was on the show.
Yeah. The live show.
Yeah, right. Although I have met that guy Tommy.
We did have Frank.
He's very
on, but
nice.
He wasn't a Democrat at that point.
Yeah, well. All right, 5 more. St. James, did you happen to notice any missing signs in Tim's studio, Emma? No way he doesn't have a No Girls Allowed poster somewhere on that compound. There's a big Do Not Disturb sign outside. Or not Do Not Disturb, Do Not Trespass sign outside the property. But,
yeah, I mean, and I just want to reiterate, generically, I would prefer it the case where workers take strike and the bosses are forced to give it to them than a slower process where, and look, I appreciate that the unions can work with Democrats to do stuff like that, but there's an underlying message there, and I don't think it's going to be enough. And I think that's why the Democrats would prefer to do it this way than the other way.
Omega, okay, on the pizza thing, try this when reheating. Put it lightly on an oiled pan. After the bottom is cooked enough to your liking, add mozzarella, drop 3 ounces of water, and cover the pan for a few minutes.
That's a lot of work to avoid cold pizza.
Yes, a cold pizza, I would just rather it be cold. Like, take it out of the fridge. It tastes better. Majority report Taylor Green. Okay, no more pizza content. I love you guys. Big thanks. I just want to compliment Emma on her dealing with Tim Pool. Knocked it out of the park. Thank you. Elwood, I would like to hear the word Trump never again, but alas, it looks like that won't happen in the near future. Is there a better word than Trump when playing trick-taking card games? And the final I am of the day, Morpheus. 82% of Hispanic Texans self-identify as white, according to 2019 ACS data, which translates to roughly 9 million people. Someone needs to tell Tim Pool that Hispanic neo-Nazi isn't necessarily the oxymoron he thinks it is, since race and ethnicity are not the same thing. Yes, our guest earlier was kind of touching on that. And
yeah, it's not Tim Pool that needs to know that, it's his audience who, like, Tim Pool knows, like, to the extent that he can know, that it's silly that act like you are confused about that.
Yeah, and then it just is.
Whiteness isn't like a particular shade of European. Like, whiteness is a political project that was formed because European settlers needed an identity to rally around that wasn't Christian.
And that's why you can see that number being so overwhelming to identify as white, especially because whiteness is associated with power in this country.
Yep.
And that's an example of white supremacy in action, where it's like you can just see how whiteness is privileged in our society in that way. All right, guys. Appreciate you all. We will be back tomorrow with Binder and Brandon as well. Save the AI DeSantis Trump stuff from the Tim Pool interview for them.
The most important question of the primary.
Oh, yes.
Tim Pool.
We will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years while I shifted in and out of